Second chance at the instant dungeon. Durrandon Baratheon's Pav. The tunnels beneath the Red Keep were a labyrinth of forgotten history. Some had been carved during Maegor's reign, meant for quick escapes and quiet killings. Others predated even the castle itself, remnants of ancient foundations of the Eggenfort swallowed by time. The deeper I ventured, the more dust and darkness pressed in, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and old secrets. The spider hadn't found these passages. Of that, I was certain. His webs stretched far, but there were places even his little birds hadn't touched. I traced my fingers along the wooden foundation, feeling the faint carvings buried beneath layers of grime. Symbols. Glyphs. Some I recognized with my fluency with High Valyrian, some not quite. The Red Keep was built over the simpler bones of something that might have drawn the conqueror's attention, and every step into its depths felt like peeling back the skin of a beast long thought dead. I moved carefully, 10 feet in every direction. I could feel the space around me, air shifting against my skin, the way sound bounced off unseen surfaces, the faint scuttle of vermin against stone. It wasn't sight, not exactly. More like a presence, a whisper at the edge of perception. A pressure that told me when something moved too close, when the space around me suddenly shifted. Beyond that, there was only darkness. Or it would have been, had I not brought along a small candle, cupping the flame as I advanced. The flickering light stretched only a few feet ahead, casting jagged shadows along the damp stone. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to make out the uneven surface of the walls, to catch the glint of something metallic buried beneath layers of dust. Enough to see the rough carvings when I traced my fingers over them, the symbols sharpening under the warm glow of the candlelight. No traps so far, but that meant little. The deeper one went, the likelier it was that Maegor or one of his architects had left something waiting for fools who wandered where they shouldn't. But the risk was so worth it. Because deep within the stone's embrace, past corridors untouched for generations, I found what I was looking for. It wasn't a cache of weapons, nor a forgotten hoard of dragon's gold. No Valyrian steel swords lay waiting for a worthy hand to claim them. Instead, spread away in dust-choked alcoves, rested something far more subtle. A pile of jewelry, not the crude, gaudy kind favored by the new nobility, but masterfully crafted pieces, bracelets, rings, pendants, fashioned from Valyrian steel and inlaid with dragonbone. A necklace, thin and elegant, reminded me of the one demon had given Rhaenyra in the start of the prequel TV show. Another ring bore the rare yet unmistakable sigils of old Valyria, its dark metal smooth as glass. They had been hidden, forgotten, left to time. But not anymore. I gathered them carefully, wrapping each piece in cloth before stowing them away. These would serve a greater purpose. At least, not yet. First came the dragonbone pieces. I had taken my time choosing them, making sure they were the least likely to be missed by my father or Varys. Sadly, my months of spying on Tobo Mott's work hasn't yet bloomed in me learning how to reforge Valyrian steel. Hell, I couldn't even be trusted with forging my own iron dagger as much as I wanted to relive my memories of grinding in Skyrim. And neither could I make any request for the Cohoric blacksmith's service, regardless if I showed him a bag full of dragon coins and the necessary materials, without the man finding it too weird for a little kid to have all of it with him or drawing the unnecessary attention of others that could persuade the man to comply. But that was where the cult of the stranger stepped in. Back in Flea Bottom, the faithful of the stranger had amassed wealth in the shadows, funds gathered from offerings, whispered deals, and the fortune they reclaimed from the butcher once he was dead. It was that coin that would be passed to Tobo Mott, their devoted faces that would persuade him to light his forge. A few dragonbone clubs, silent, sturdy, and fitting for those who walked in death's shadow. Small buckler shields, lightweight and strong. And, the most ambitious of all, a hand crossbow. The latter would take time. Too much time. But that was fine. Some investments were worth the wait. And then, there was my own order. I slipped a hand beneath my cloak, fingers brushing against the weight of my coin pouch I had stashed away for quite a while until now. Hard collected gold, saved for this moment. Not a weapon, not a tool for others. Something for myself. A chain shirt, small enough to fit a boy of 7, forged from interlocking rings, designed to be worn beneath layers of cloth to muffle its presence. Not as protective as a full suit of plate armor, but far better than my previous gambeson. But I didn't just focus on getting myself better equipment. After all, I had myself to keep improving. That is why, now looking for the 2 pings I had recently received from my game system, I was glad that both my nights entertaining my siblings and exploring the deepest parts of the Red Keep didn't go unnoticed. Class Progress Update. Bard Subclass, Glamour, Rank D+. Your words can cause a mixture of awe and fear. With performances that are the stuff of legend, you will be capable of quelling beasts and bending minds, gladdening the downtrodden and undermining oppressors. The Glamour Subclass. Okay, I will be honest, not exactly what I was expecting. Not that I had anything else in mind, but it's just that I don't know what to expect from it. Beguiling magic. You've learned how to fright or charm anyone that witnesses your spells that bring forth illusions or trick minds from the inside. That seems really to amplify my charisma, especially with my cantrips. Charming two targets with a single cast of friends, or similarly causing some fear after landing that perfect vicious mockery. But that wasn't the only thing this feature granted me. On top of that neat ability, I also learned 2 new spells to make use with my recently expanded pool of divine points. Charm Person was basically a more potent version of my friend's cantrip, lasting 1 hour instead of 1 minute and with no need to keep concentrating on it. And Mirror Image, instead of the awesome mental image I had of making visual decoys to bait an enemy into striking them instead of me, I actually understood how to mess with others' perception of me, instinctively staying light on my feet and constantly feinting my momentum as if I was about to start running towards some random direction. It would certainly be very useful in a duel against a dangerous opponent. Just the fleeting memory of the spectre that had almost ended me before I could escape already sent chills down my spine. Wisdom save succeed. Frightened condition resisted. I haven't forgotten about you, just you wait. Enthralling performance. You've learned how to subtly charge your performance with seductive or exciting magic. While charmed in this way, the target idolizes you, it speaks glowingly of you to anyone who speaks to it, and it hinders anyone who opposes you, avoiding violence unless it was already inclined to fight on your behalf. This might not sound useful in combat, but it's not as if life was a constant direct confrontation. To be able to charm people without risking getting caught by simply singing and telling more of the songs and tales that I got inspired by my previous life, this certainly was a power I would find great use abusing. As for the other spell I learned, comprehend languages, nothing busted as what I already got, but still, I just loved learning new rituals that didn't always need to consume my magic to make a difference. Another window appeared next to everything else I got from my bard class. Congratulations! You have unlocked a new feat, Inspiring Leader. Influencing others comes so naturally to you, earning you the following benefits. Ability score increase. Your charisma score increases by 1. Master Manipulator. You gain expertise in persuasion, proficiency with animal handling or proficiency with intimidation. Pick 1. Quick Influence. You can use your deception, intimidation, performance, persuasion, or animal handling skill even during combat without sacrificing your focus to attack. Despite the sound of expertise in persuasion was so appealing to me, it just felt like overkill for now. A bit of the opposite case for intimidation, sure it would have its uses in the future, but for now I've already milked everything I could from animal handling and my lowest mental ability score, which was wisdom. The moment I selected animal handling to be the next skill I had proficiency with, the feat locked into place and my view of how to put my pets into use changed. Just like it wasn't with the rest of my skills, not in some grand magical way. Before I could dwell on it further, my attention was directed towards the last game window that remained after I went through everything my bard class granted me. Class Progress Update. Hunter, Rank C. Extra Attack 1. You've learned how to strike more frequently, either by learning how to swing your blade more precisely, draw your bow more easily or find more gaps in your target's defenses. Simple enough, but I still favored finishing things as quickly as I could, though with this I could feel more confident about spreading the pain before running away and trying to surprise my targets again. The cherry on top of rising the rank of this class was my primal magic pool increase and the fact that it seems to have reached a point where I've actually learned more powerful spells. Tier 2 to be precise, alongside 14 freaking primal points per long rest. That meant that I could cast my spells more reliably, around 4 to 7 times before having to take a nap depending on the tier of my spells. That was truly amazing. I've been meaning to make more use of my Hail of Thorns concoctions of exploding arrows. Now, about my new spells, they weren't exactly very good offensive-wise, but they more than compensated with their durations. Up to 8 hours after a quick test. Dark vision wasn't exactly something that I couldn't live without up to now, mostly because the moonlight at Flea Bottom and my blind sight were good enough to prevent me from being lost in deep shadows. But I totally expected that to change once I returned to the instant dungeon and delved even deeper than I first did. When the dark vision spell took hold as I bit a dried carrot, it slithered into my eyes like liquid mercury, the world didn't so much brighten as it unfurled. For a moment, my brain almost rebelled. Like blind sight, this wasn't natural sight, it's magic stitching images into my mind. Faraway shadows that were once impenetrable voids now revealed themselves as gradients of cool, ghostly luminescence. It was as if someone had peeled back a layer of reality, exposing the hidden pulse of the darkness itself. Then came the thrill. The fear of the dark, an ancient human instinct even present in those forced to survive in dark places, melted away. I really felt like a predator stepping into a hunt. The night wasn't just a way to level the playing field, but an advantage. As for aid, it was like a rush of wild vitality flooding my veins just as I wrapped a white cloth around my hand, like the second wind of a predator pushing through exhaustion to chase down prey. Plus 5 HP. Current HP, 15. My muscles tightened with raw endurance, as if I've just taken a deep breath of mountain air, more capable of shrugging off blows that would stagger a lesser traveler. The magic coursing through me carries a faint earthy scent, damp soil, pine resin, or the iron tang of a fresh kill, reminding me that nature thrives by enduring. Once it wore off, there was no crash, just the gradual return of fatigue, like a fire burning down to embers. Quest alert. The hero's trials are not over. Time to face your biggest ordeal so far. Condition. Defeat the instant dungeon's boss. Optional condition. Do not use another returning stone. Reward. Level up 2 of your classes. Optional reward. Better loot. Yes, no. Feeling the changes my recent improvements have brought me, I couldn't help a grin from forming on my face as I thought to myself. I believe that I'm finally ready for a rematch. Time to go back to the instant dungeon. Title. Durrandon Baratheon, Crown Prince Small Human, Neutral. Level. 5 Proficiency Bonus, plus 3. Class. Assassin C, Glamour D+, Fighter D, Hunter C, Artificer D. HP. 10 Armor Class. 16 Chain Shirt plus Dragon Bone Buckler Shield. Divine Points. 6 Max Tier, 1. Primal Points. 14 Max Tier, 2. Arcane Points. 2 Max Tier, 1. Speed. 3.5 miles per hour 30 feet. Traits. Beguiling Magic, Enthralling Performance, Extra Attack 1. Feats. Inspiring Leader. STR. 8-1 Child's Body Penalty. EXP Athletics. Plus 5. Dex. 9-1 Child's Body Penalty, plus 1 Ability Score pending, Proficient Save plus 2. EXP Acrobatics. Plus 5. Pro, Sleight of Hand. Plus 2. EXP Stealth. Plus 5. Con. 8-1 Child's Body Penalty. Int. 16 plus 3 Proficient Save plus 6. Pro Arcana. Plus 6. Pro History. Plus 6. Pro Investigation. Plus 6. Nature. Plus 5. Religion. Plus 5. Wis. 15 plus 2. Pro Animal Handling. Plus 5. EXP Insight. Plus 8. Medicine. Plus 4. EXP Perception. Plus 8. EXP Survival. Plus 8. Cha. 19 plus 4. EXP Deception. Plus 10. Intimidation. Plus 6. EXP Performance. Plus 10. Pro Persuasion. Plus 7. Cantrips. Friends Vicious Mockery, Shillelagh, Thorn Whip Mending Guidance True Strike. First Tier Divine Spells. Sleep, Hideous Laughter, Heroism, Comprehend Languages, Charm Person, Mirror Image Asterisk. First Tier Primal Spells. Goodberry, Hail of Thorns, Longstrider, Animal Friendship. Second Tier Primal Spells. Dark Vision Aid. First Tier Arcane Spells. Detect Magic, Purify Food and Drink. So it was finally time. Tomorrow morning I would wake up to the first day of the tournament dedicated to celebrating my 6th name day, regardless if I alone knew that I was probably already past my 7th. Still, for all the resolve I had steeled in myself, the air was eerily still. Not the quiet of an empty corridor or the hushed silence of a sleeping castle, but something heavier. A weight pressing down on my lungs, curling around my ribs like an unseen chain. I stood before the hidden entrance, the same patch of wall where the portal had once shimmered, waiting like an open maw. It was gone now, sealed away in the depths of my system, waiting for the magical red key in my possession to return. I hadn't brought it out of my pocket. Not yet. My hands were steady, my breathing even, but that meant nothing. The body adapts. It grows stronger, learns to withstand pain, hunger, exhaustion. But the mind remembers. My mind remembered the hunger first, the gnawing, endless ache in my gut, the way it hollowed me out, turned me into something desperate, something willing to snap the bones of any living prey like rats and bats just to suck the marrow dry. Then the thirst, thicker, sharper. The hours spent staring at the ceiling, watching droplets form, almost always a bit too willing to let them fall into my waiting mouth without even properly boiling it. The cold, the dark, the sound of my own heartbeat echoing through the tunnels, the constant tension, the knowledge that something, was always just beyond the next turn. And the spectre. I had faced Carl Tanner. I had pierced his throat with my own Valyrian steel dagger and watched the butcher of Flea Bottom bleed out on the floor of his own turf. I had fought men, real men, who thought themselves predators. I had become something worse than them to win. And yet, when I thought of the dungeon, it wasn't the zombies or the skeletons or even the nights spent curled up in a corner, shivering, that haunted me. It was that incorporeal undead. Its soundless movement, the hollow slits of its helm, the way the air itself recoiled when it reached for me. Through sheer luck, skill or a combination of both, I had escaped. I had survived, but I had not beaten it. I let out a slow breath and turned my hands over, inspecting the faintest scars across my fingers that only I could feel their presence, the calluses hardened from a year's worth of struggles that never happened. That was the worst part, wasn't it? That no one would ever know. Sure, beats having to risk coming back to a world that long ago I was dead, but not by that much of a margin. I had aged, I had suffered, I had fought, but the world outside had stayed still, frozen in the same moment I left it. The same stars, the same moon, the same whispers of courtly intrigue drifting through the Red Keep's halls. To them, I had never left. But I had, and I had been reforged in order to return. I had lost something down there, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. And yet, here I was. Not because I wanted to be. Because I had to be. The system was ruthless, but it wasn't wrong. This instant dungeon was my crucible. It had stripped me down to my bones and forced me to rebuild myself with nothing but instinct and will. And now, if I wanted to grow, if I wanted to truly become strong enough to carve out my place in this world with something more than my royal name, I had to go back. I had to see it again. The dark corridors, the endless maze with its creative traps, the undead lurking in the shadows. And I had to face it. Not to kill it, not to destroy it, but to prove to myself that I could stand before it again and not break. I closed my eyes, steadied my breath and brought forth my magical red key, once again using it on the lock that just spawned out of nowhere. Immediately after, the portal shimmered before me, an unnatural gash in the world, rippling like the surface of disturbed water. I stared at it. The magical red key felt heavier in my grip, as if it knew what I was about to do. As if it was waiting for me to change my mind. I had prepared for this. Braced for it. And yet, standing here now, something twisted inside my chest. A tight coil of instinct that warned me to turn away. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath, exhaling slowly. My fingers tightened around the magical red key as I once again stored it away. And yet, my feet didn't move. Not for 10 seconds. Not for 20. A full minute passed, my breathing slow, measured. My system remained silent. No pop-up window mocking me for hesitating. No wisdom save to reflect the moment of weakness. It was just me, standing at the threshold, knowing what lay beyond. Finally acknowledging all of that for the last time, I clenched my jaw and stepped forward. The world folded in on itself. Magic swallowed me whole, the air thinning, the distant pressure of something vast and unseen brushing against my skin. Then, darkness, silence. I was back. For a moment, nothing moved. My breath echoed too loud in the all too familiar entrance, my heartbeat the only sound. Something flickered in the corner of my eye and I turned my head, breath caught in my throat. My old gear, scattered across the stone floor, exactly as I had left it. The broken hilts, the makeshift traps, the bone darts stripped from undead hands. Not a single speck of dust had settled over them. The bloodstains remained dark, the metal untouched by rust. As if I had only just set them down. It was the same, exactly the same. The realization crawled up my spine, slow and suffocating. Time, it appears at a first glance, had not moved here. Just like the real world froze when I stepped inside, this place, too, had been sealed in place the moment I left. No decay, no change, no reset. This wasn't just a place. It was a prison, caught between moments, waiting for me. And now, I have returned. Exhaling through my nose while rolling my shoulders, I forced my body to move, to do anything but stand there like some frozen prey animal. The near-endless staircase was still there, leading me deeper into the bowels of the maze which I knew waited for me. Despite having no proper map of the place, it still felt like I had descended for miles, easily edging over the distance I had to cover just to sneak out of the Red Keep during my night escapades to Flea Bottom. I had walked these steps before. But as I moved, there was a difference now. A shadow of myself, lingering, not real, but present through the tracks I inadvertently left behind. My past self, a ghost memory in the shape of a boy creeping through these corridors with shaky hands and unsteady breath, thinking he was careful. Now, I saw the flaws. The rushed footing, the hesitation before each turn, the unnecessary tension in my grip. I had survived, yes. But looking back, I saw just how sloppy I had been and how much my luck had carried me through it. Before I could dwell too much on that, a familiar game window flickered into view. You cannot exit the dungeon from where you entered it. You must either defeat the boss or use a return stone. Right. No going back. Hopefully it won't take me years and years to either find another returning stone or end the boss. Worst case scenario would be that spectre which resembled a Kingsguard still having 6 more White Cloak brothers patrolling somewhere deeper into this maze and a king they all serve. If there is anything closer to a dragon down here, then I guess I can just say goodbye to my life and give up clearing this instant dungeon. Regardless, the tunnel kept stretching before me, torches flickering too steadily and unnaturally, their glow making the shadows twitch. My eyes traced the carvings along the walls, the same deep, deliberate symbols I had dismissed as unknowable on my first descent. But this time, I was prepared. Lowering myself into a crouch, I pulled a small pouch from my belt. Inside, soot and salt, simple, easy to carry components. A pinch of each was all I needed. Beginning ritual casting. Comprehend languages. For 10 minutes, I traced small patterns in the dust, whispering the spell's cadence under my breath. My fingers brushed the cool, ancient stone, and I let the arcane energy flow, embedding itself into me. Then, it clicked. A pulse of magic flared behind my eyes and into my mind, the symbols twisting, aligning, into something I could finally understand. Arcana check succeed. It was an odd experience. Unlike the simple, functional magic within my Valyrian steel dagger, which whispered words like lighter, sharper, durable, these walls were woven with something far more intricate. The carvings reinforced the same intention over and over, in countless variations. A trial of survival, designed to filter out those without potential. A bridge between dimensions. A hunting ground severed from the regular flow of time, shielded from any prying eyes. I exhaled slowly, my breath barely disturbing the stale air, understanding the words, but not the power behind them. Their surface purpose was clear, but their activation, their deeper function, that was still far beyond me. That, more than anything, told me just how far I still had to go. As I kept moving, the tunnel expectedly widened as it once did, and the stench of rot met me like an old friend. The alcoves came into view, the same rusted iron bars, the same glass pots filled with liquid death. Wildfire. Last time, I had avoided them. Smart. I wouldn't have been able to transport them safely without a plan in mind. But now, I know exactly how to put them to good use. A controlled explosion could clear a path or be my last resort if things go south. Finally crouching down, I examined the intact pots. The glass was thick, reinforced, likely alchemically treated to withstand extreme conditions. But that didn't mean they were foolproof. A wrong step, a careless movement, and I could end up as nothing more than a smear on the dungeon walls. First, I tested the weight. Heavy, but manageable. Next, I checked for stability. The pots were stored in ancient iron brackets, rusted but still holding firm. Good. That meant I could remove them carefully without disturbing the others. I took out a strip of cloth from my pack, wrapping it tightly around the body of one of the glass containers before gently lifting it from its cradle. No sudden movements. No jerking. Just smooth, steady pressure. The pot eventually came free and a slow exhale left my lips. One down. I repeated the process, securing 3 in total, patting them with cloth and carefully placing them into my pack, keeping them nestled between softer items to prevent any jostling. That was the easy part. The real challenge would be keeping them intact while moving deeper into the dungeon. Beyond the alcoves, where I had fought my first real enemy, the corpse of the zombie remained, a twisted, motionless heap of rot and rusted armor. I stepped closer, weapons drawn, though I knew it wouldn't rise again. And yet, something about the scene felt off. Crouching down, I proceeded to inspect the body with fresh eyes, seeing what I had missed before. Investigation check succeed. The broken pieces of its helm, the way my arrows had hit, not clean. Not perfect. Too much force was wasted. Too many movements that could have been smoother, more efficient. My past self had fought thinking he was precise. But standing here now, seeing the angles, the placement of the strikes, I had been reckless, and lucky. A sharp, efficient fighter didn't just win. They won without excess. Without wasted motion. I not only could do better, but I will. It was a matter of life or death after all. Straightening up, I glanced at the dim passage ahead. The silence pressed in, but I could almost hear my past self breathing heavily, heart pounding after the fight, feeling victorious, feeling capable. It wasn't enough. I wasn't the same as I was back then. And the next time I fought, I would prove it. In any case, I eventually moved on. I knew my way through the trail of undead I left behind on my first visit. Some still slumped where I'd felled them, half-collapsed things with missing heads or pierced skulls, like forgotten marionettes mid-performance. But even the ones that had since rotted further or shifted slightly in place told a story. The broken angles of their limbs, the spatter of bone and gore on the walls, the direction of their fall. Each mark whispered a wordless chronicle of my struggle, of how I had clawed my way forward with grit, sweat, and, admittedly, more luck than I'd deserved. But that was then. Now, I survived by my own design. The maze hadn't changed in nature, only in how I saw it. And the deeper I moved inward, the more I noticed it. The air, once cold and biting, now rose by slow degrees, not hot, not yet, but warmer than the clammy chill that ruled the maze's outer coils. I remembered shivering as I'd first wandered these halls, the cold worming through my skin, gnawing at the joints, leeching strength from bone and thought alike. That kind of cold didn't just freeze flesh, it bred fear. Now it was almost cozy. Like a hearth fire in the dead of winter. It almost felt like an illusion, a trap made of comfort, wrapping around the spine instead of the throat. I didn't trust it, but I couldn't pretend it wasn't a relief, regardless of how the tunnels eventually stopped spiraling into predictable curves. They branched. Crooked, cunning things, some narrow enough that I had to turn sideways to squeeze through, my pack and gear scraping harshly against calcified bone walls. I felt it then, how I'd grown. Not by much, but enough. In size. In presence. My old steps didn't quite fit me anymore. Others opened like the mouths of yawning crypts, revealing chambers lined with crumbling wall tombs. Skulls watched from hollow sockets, their expressions frozen in what I imagined was hunger. Or maybe envy, seeing a living thing walk where they never could again. Some of the traps I'd laid back then still stood, sprung but unbloodied. The ones that hadn't been tripped still had my visual signs to not let me forget of their existence. Passing them with a nod, as if to an old comrade. A crude pendulum here, a hidden snare there, rusted steel and spell-worked tripwires, each one a silent monument to the first war I'd fought through these walls. I could almost hear the dungeon growling, low and bitter, each time I robbed it of a kill. My golden heart bow had become a constant companion, no longer a tool of desperation as it was with my already discarded regular shortbow, but a finely tuned instrument. Not that I hadn't spent weeks carving and reinforcing its shaft whenever I found the time, polishing the grip with leather torn from my undead kills. Learning to repair its string with my mending cantrip, reassembling my own broken arrows after one too many uses. Even in the deep dark, I never felt unarmed or out of my depth. Never unprepared, especially with my dark vision spell granting me several hours of clear sight while anyone else would have been left fumbling in pitch black. The ambushing skeletons were lesser pests now. Predictable. Sloppy. Remembering the first time I'd gripped a bone club down here, sweaty hands, wild swings, praying one hit would land. Now, my dragonbone club, short, dense, and dark as night, had become an extension of my arm. It wasn't elegant, but it didn't need to be. One blow to the temple or neck and the things crumbled like cracked porcelain. I paired each strike with true strike, muttered like a breath of clarity, a whisper of precision. Every swing became an art form. Every motion, measured, calculated. It cost me a bit of mobility to make use of my steady aim and assure my sneak attacks, sure. But what I lost in speed, I made up for in certainty, if not with a bit of a constant overkill. What once took everything I had just to survive, now it was training. And whether it realized or not, the instant dungeon had become my tutor. Incidentally, my food didn't make me sick anymore. I remembered the early days, gnawing half-burned rat meat, drinking slime scraped off moss-slick walls, boiled over sputtering flames in rusted zombie helmets or cracked pieces of chest plate. Remembered vomiting it all up moments later, the gut-wrenching spasms, the feverish shakes, the cold sweats that clung like a second skin. And worst of all, the improvisation. Having to squat behind debris or carve out a makeshift latrine in the corner of a crypt. The indignity. The pain. The bile. For a moment I finally realized what Daenerys might have felt like while she was stuck surviving in the Dothraki Sea. But that was then. Now, I took 10 minutes before every meal. Drawing slow, careful circles into the stone floor with my Valyrian steel dagger, like a prayer in steel. Purify food and drink. The spell thrummed through my hands and into the circle, a soft note of magic vibrating against the filth. When I ate and drank, I did so without fear. Rest-casting Goodberry gave me balance, sustenance without risking my reserve of true magic. Sweet, nourishing orbs the size of knucklebones. They kept me sharp, steady, focused. I'd learned to mix them with dried rat meat like jerky, wrap the bundle in moss I'd purified into something paper-thin. Crude cuisine, to which Elise might have 1,000 words of how I could improve on it, but still, it gave me energy. Not just to move, but to think. To plan. Even sleep, once a gamble with fevered dreams and cold dread, had become sacred. I built my rest sites with even more layered complexity this time. Traps disarmed and rebuilt as barricades, pressure plates rewired as alarms, noisemakers tied to tripwires strung like spider silk across narrow passages. A single scuff, a breath out of place, I'd know. I trained myself to sleep in rotations. Breath counting, pulse tracking, falling into rhythm until unconsciousness came clean and fast, and waking up only when something was wrong, not just when a rat skittered past or the ceiling decided to weep. Rest wasn't a pause anymore. It was part of my arsenal. Despite all my improvements, all the tricks and layers of precautions, time still blurred in the dark as I moved twice as fast, maybe more. But no light meant no sunrises, no sunsets. No markers but the scrape of boots on dirty stone and the meticulous investigation of every pathway I took. I tried my best to keep count. By spells cast, by how long it took my magic to return after each rest. By how often my hands shook with the first warning of exhaustion. At first, I counted days. Then weeks. Eventually, I stopped pretending. It might have been months. Might have been longer. But as the filth of the dungeon settled over me like a second skin, I allowed myself to change. Began collecting fungus and moss, not just to eat, but to study and to experiment with them. I'd felt it before. Faint pulses of magic, like heartbeats caught in stone. They clung to walls and ceilings, bloomed from corpses and cracked tiles. I watched how some mushrooms died in light and thrived in blood. How others released spores only when stepped on, clouds of sleep or sickness. With patience and several ruinous trials, I learned to distill them. A cracked vial here, a melted pouch there, but over time, I made progress. I scraped their oils into waxed cloth, mixed with purified water, ash, or blood. A green-tinged paste that corroded bone. A yellow dust that I could better manipulate with my tinker's tools. Poison didn't matter against the dead, not in the way it would have against breathing men and beasts. But some reagents still had weight in the arcane. Some whispered of alchemy I couldn't name yet, couldn't wield yet. I kept them anyway. But the biggest change wasn't in my hands. It was in how I wore my skin. It started small. A smear of undead ash across the cheeks, to dull the heat of living flesh. A broken gait, mimicking the undead limp. Holding my breath when they passed, eyes low, steps dragging. It worked. A little. Better than the last time. Some walked by, others stared, but fortunately none lunged this time. So I didn't abandon it. I improved. I learned to stitch together rags and bone scraps into something closer to their shape. Bone-stitched armor. Loose, layered cloth soaked in filth, stiffened with rot and sulfur. A mask crafted from cracked jawbone and soot-darkened resin, with hollow eye holes and wire holding the jaw in place. Masking any scent these decomposing things might track with liquefied carrion, and muffled my breath with smoldering dung and moss. Crude, at first, but effective enough. Eventually, it was no longer just disguise. It was communion. They walked past me. Undead that once screamed and charged now shuffled by with vacant stares. Skeletons stared, hesitated, but didn't draw blades. Even the erratic and twitching ones, jaw-clacking horrors, only paused. Studied me, and then moved on. I was one of them. At least enough to trick the things that used to hunt me. And with that came the real prize, observation. I watched, learned, listened. Some groups moved in loops, circling the same ruined hallways again and again like prisoners pacing their cells. Others stood still until sound pulled them to life, jaws clicking in unison. Some twitched at motion, others only to heat. Patterns. Hierarchies. There were rules. And rules meant structure. Structure meant will. They weren't completely mindless. They were bound, tethered, to something older, deeper, crawling at the root of this place. And that's what intrigued me most. Because if they were bound, something had done the binding. Will that be the boss of this dungeon? In all honesty, I was starting to doubt my ability to retrace my steps. The first time I'd wandered blindly, relying on instinct and dumb luck to stumble across the spectre and the returning stone that saved my life. Now, I had at least the heat as my guide, a steady pulse of rising warmth I could feel in my bones, drawing me back toward the maze's core. Which was why I noticed the shift. The air changed, colder than it once was moments before. Not just a chill caused by the stray breeze that might have blown through the corridor I found myself at. It was unnatural. Still, I knew that feeling. I immediately secured the wildfire pots I brought along from near the entrance, hiding them before one could shatter by accident, and pressed my back to the nearest wall, breath shallow. The chipped stone of the corridor looked somewhat the same as before. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I waited, listened and watched, until it finally came into my view. That same cursed silhouette. Full plate armor that bore no weight. A white cloak that fluttered without wind. And in the center of its translucent chest, a golden crown sigil still appears faintly, like some stubborn claim to authority long since devoured by time. Before I could feel the expected shivers down my spine, I reached for some of my bardic magic and casted my heroism spell. -2 divine points. 4/6 DP. Wisdom save succeed. You have resisted being frightened. So this time, I didn't freeze. This time, my hands didn't tremble. I'd seen it before, and had become a similar nightmare in the eyes of my previous targets. Swiftly crouching, silently, I reached for my golden heart shortbow strapped to my back. My dragonbone club and buckler shield both rested in easy reach. And deep beneath, arcane patterns danced through my mind, faint, hidden under the layers of survival instincts. I'd practiced it, fight after fight in the dark of this instant dungeon, until the cantrip flowed like a reflex. Whispering the costless magic spell, true strike, possibilities branched in my mind's eye. The tension of 100 fates collapsing into one surged through the string as I drew it back, the effort of ripping through those realities channel enough energy into my arrow to make it radiate light for a split second. The next strike would not merely phase through it, but might actually severely harm the spectre. Stealth check succeed. My ghostly prey hovered past, unaware as I exhaled slowly, carefully aiming before releasing. The golden heart bow sang, not a whistle, but a note of pressure splitting the air. The arrow gleamed as it cut toward its target. And missed. For the first time in this life, I felt my luck actively screwing over me. Despite how near perfect my aim might have seemed to me as I committed myself to the first strike of our combat, I still missed its target by an infuriating and negligible margin. Luck, that wretched coin toss of fate, failed me just when I had most odds stacked in my favor. Apparently mocking me that there would be no critically hitting my way through this fight. Just then, the spectre froze midair, helmet snapping toward me. The slits in its visor burned with cold malice. Shit, my strength was in the first strike. Assassinate, one shot, one kill, no witnesses. Now I had to run or be devoured. Stealth check succeed. I slipped behind a crumbled wall section, heart pounding while I cursed the fact this wasn't really a game. There was no AI leash that would make it forget me after a few seconds. The spectre would search until time itself gave up. And I wouldn't survive a second mistake. So I bought my time and calculated. Until I finally made up my mind, sacrificing my mobility and ability to quickly seek cover with steady aim just to get a second chance. I loosened another arrow that thankfully struck home this time. It didn't slow it down, but the spectre felt the hit now. -10 HP. It didn't flinch, but definitely felt it. The distance between us vanished in a breath. It flew, weightless and wrathful. Its blade wasn't swung like a human's, which targeted its opponent's body. It aimed for my soul, to inject a curse, to drain the essence of me. I barely ducked it while raising my buckler shield and grabbing my dragonbone club. Its ghostly blade sliced past, brushing close enough to frost the hairs on my shield arm, as if death had scratched over my soul. Unfortunately, I failed to connect my next two melee attacks, proving once again that I was fighting out of my element. A second ghostly strike lashed down toward my head, until I reacted and my club met its shadowed limb, faint light blooming on impact. Not from strength. From essence. Dragonbone against the unnatural. -4 HP. The blow wasn't heavy, but it didn't need to be. Its nature was something the spectre abhorred. A ripple tore through its form. It shrieked, but no sound came. The scream lived in my teeth, in my skull, vibrating through my bones. Stealth check failed. I rolled away, low to the ground. It phased into the wall, only to reappear around the corner, searching. No footsteps, no noise, only silent and tireless dread. The buckler in my left hand wasn't used just for defense, but also for misdirection. More than a few feints have saved me. When my opponent reappeared, I struck again, true strike flaring. My club connected with its shoulder this time. The magic sparked like flint, carving light into its smoke-wrapped body. -6 HP. It reeled, twisted, and struck back. Lashing out its cursed blade scraped my shoulder just as I performed my uncanny dodge. HP. 10/15. Not deep, just a graze, but even that stung like Carl Tanner's stab to my sides and threatened to drain me of something. A piece of warmth, of self. Constitution save succeed. Pain like a memory carved into my nerves. But my soul held through the grit of my very spirit. This time, I resisted. No part of me would be left behind if I remained in its reach. Even so, I pressed the attack. It was faster, stronger, but I was smarter. I finally got a good understanding of its limits. Its tactics. Its range. Its telltale flicker before vanishing into the wall. So I knew there was a way for me to win. The final strike was not a roaring spectacle. No clever flourish. No clever words of celebration. -5 HP. Just silence as my club bludgeoned its way through incorporeal armor with certainty, cracking through like ice giving way under boot. It didn't shatter, but actually dissolved. Pale glowing mist rising in tendrils that curled upward like smoke returning to the sky. No scream. No curse. Just stillness until it was finally gone. And then, that pulse. Faint, familiar. A returning stone lay near the corner where the spectre had guarded before I engaged it. Not broken. Not burned out like the one I'd used before. That one had vanished, burning to nothing as it tore me from this place. This one was whole. And slowly, the realization crept in. This wasn't the same one. Which meant, it wasn't the same spectre. Approaching it with no hesitation, no fear, just quiet certainty as I picked it up, magic humming beneath the surface, waiting. Returning stone found. Would you like to leave the dungeon? Yes, no. And just like that, I could leave now. I could end this. It was as if the instant dungeon itself was testing me, asking me if the couple of months I had spent here were enough. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not because I was safe, but because I knew I was far from done here. Suffice to say, I did not leave. The dungeon offered me a way out, a door, a mercy, as if patting me on the back and telling me to know my limits. But instead, I stayed. Taking the returning stone, I slipped it into one of the smaller pockets at my waist, and stepped deeper into the instant dungeon. The air kept growing hotter. Not hellfire, not yet, since I chose to circle the center before closing in on it. But the heat climbed steadily, sweat clinging to my collarbone, soaking into the leather wrap of my bow's grip. My chain shirt chafed. The burden of it grew with every day. Still, I pressed on. All the while, somewhere out of reach, that thrill of the hunt kept calling. But it didn't take long for me to answer back, as the second ghostly Kingsguard fell in silence. This time, I played it safe. Tracked it for 4 days. Marked its patrol routes. Charted the way it flickered through walls like mist in a graveyard. It carried a longsword like a judge and moved with a grim precision, slower than the first, but more deliberate, more dangerous. So I waited, struck like a vicious snake only once luck had been strangled out of the equation as much as I could. Hunter's mark thrummed the moment I whispered it, no hand gestures, no grand display, for the primal magic I was channeling knew exactly what my quarry was. I felt its natural resistances like whispers crawling through my blood, and when its foot brushed the salt and soot ward I'd etched into the stone, I loosed the arrow. The shaft punched through its spectral cloak like sunlight through fog, slamming into the ghost flesh beneath as its head snapped forward with a violent jolt. No blood gushed out of it, but the magic carried by the strike tore through whatever tied its undead existence to this plane. The creature recoiled, twisting midair, that same inhuman motion like a puppet on invisible strings before being cut loose. Critical hit. Sneak attack. -38 HP. It crumbled in silence, and I stood alone once more in the dimly lit maze, another returning stone pocketed, a satisfied grin breaking through the heat and sweat. But victories like that didn't come without cost, for even with all my caution and recently acquired experience with dealing with these apparitions, the third spectre found me first. No ambush. No setup. Just a silent scream and sudden lunge. I fought, or better said, fled from it for what felt like hours. Facing it not directly in the open, but elusively in intervals between skirmishes that followed. Striking from afar, vanishing, I insisted on luring it to dead ends where I had the advantage. Each time it took a hit, Colossus Slayer whispered through my veins and into my aim, forcing that extra punishment into its incorporeal wounds. Its armor cracked under the continuous weight of my arrows, while my shield arm bled from shallow necrotic cuts I barely managed to avoid. My focus narrowed to a single thread. Don't get cornered and don't get hit. When I finally brought it down, I didn't celebrate. I vomited, collapsed against the dungeon wall and shook as I suffered a level of exhaustion after failing the always so dreaded Constitution save. Another scar, this time next to my left forearm, was added to my growing catalog of near deaths. Still, even through the physical ache on my recently earned battle scar, I noticed the shimmer left behind by the ghost's passing. Dust, faintly alive. It didn't always linger. If I wasn't quick, it would vanish like smoke in the wind. But this time, Arcana check succeed. I drew the essence into a twisted iron vial I'd made from repurposed weapon parts, its rim sealed with a glyph in charcoal. The spectre dust curled inside, restless, as if aware. Later, I found something else. A single white braid of hair. Cold to the touch, but unmistakably, real. A spectre remnant. Didn't know what I'd use these parts for, but knew better than to throw them away. And while my collection grew, so did I. By then, my hands had slowly started to change before my eyes. Not childlike anymore, no longer gentle and soft. My knuckles had grown sharper, my grip steadier. My voice cracked when I muttered incantations, and the ghostly chill that once made me flinch now merely irritated me. And then came the dreams. Heat-laced and strange, tangled with half-memories, women I'd seen in the Red Keep, or remembered reading about them back in my old life. Cersei, Sansa, Daenerys, Catelyn, Arianne, Val, Marjorie, and many more females kept visiting me in my thoughts. With all the drive I could muster, I buried them beneath my survival instincts. They had no place here. This dungeon wasn't a place for longing. It wanted me focused or would not hesitate to end my life in the most horrible way it could possibly come up with. And so I gave it what it wanted. The deeper I kept venturing, the more the maze kept shifting. Walls bent subtly, angles skewed just enough to make my sense of direction twist. Some corridors led back to themselves. And the heat, no longer a creeping presence, was now a constant pressure, like a forge actively working to shape me. To the point it eventually forced me to abandon the chain shirt that has been giving me a sense of security up till now. Not just due to the heat that was starting to affect my mind, but because my shoulders had broadened, and my last layer of defense had started to restrict me. AC 13. As I got over the annoying feeling of being less protected than I should, time once again blurred. Days turned to weeks. Eventually, the months bled together, to the point where my drive to keep fighting and exploring almost dimmed. But then they finally appeared. At first I didn't notice if they were drawn to each other, or bound by something older. Two specters. Together. One wielded a greatsword while the other a shimmering shield and arming sword that moved with eerie coordination. Instinctively, I opted to finally try my Hail of Thorns spell, chanting its magical words right before loosening my grip over my golden heart tree shortbow string, my arrow breaking apart so it could hit a small area where both my targets were all at once. -2 primal point. 12/14 pp. -9 HP. -8 HP. Despite finally being capable of slinging out some spells without draining my entire pool of magic, I must admit that the current results I got from them were somewhat disappointing. At the very least my attacks didn't completely phase through them, but they still weren't the visual triumph I was expecting. Stupid me. Should have just gone for Horde Breaker. At least I would have got a critical hit sneak attack in. I berate myself in silent anger. Neither of them spoke, but they didn't need to. At that moment I just knew that I couldn't face them both directly, so I ran towards the nearest place for me to hide and dashed out of there before the two apparitions reached me. Even one-on-one, the fights had been coin tosses. Together, they were death incarnate. So, after chastising myself enough about getting too cocky, I finally decided to hunt them down the right way. Led them apart, using some old armor scraps to mimic my footsteps. Lured the greatsword-wielding one into a chamber rigged with rusted chains and broken tiles that were meant to be used as a trap for anyone exploring this maze. And then collapsed the ceiling on the clueless spectre before quickly dousing the remains in wildfire before it had the opportunity to phase out of my trap. The second undead surprised me by how quickly it managed to come to its ally's aid, nearly getting me by exploiting the gap my lack of proper armor left before I could make sure I had taken the first one down. This sword and shield wielding spectre would have finished the job, if not for my uncanny dodge coming in clutch like always, as it clipped my thigh, phantom blade meeting flesh. I would be lying if that near-death experience didn't seem to succeed in ruthlessly maiming part of my spirit. Constitution save failed. HP maximum has been reduced. HP 3/9. The need to cry out in pain was almost overbearing, but if I wanted to live I just couldn't spare the time. I had to keep moving, to somehow outthink and outmaneuver a ghostly knight that could phase through solid walls. Interestingly enough, I got the best proof of how valuable my action surge feature was beyond merely getting an extra boost to my offensive, as it pushed me beyond my limits of regular speed and allowed me to cover more ground than I usually did. Slipping around corners, vanishing as it chased me, but failed to keep sight of me through every twist and turn. Later, when I was sure it had lost me, I collapsed in a half-broken alcove and tried to heal, as I kept seething in pain with black veins pulsating around the wound the last spectre left in me. No matter what I did, how many goodberries I ate, or how many second wins I spent, I just couldn't heal myself back to normal. HP 9/9. And so that same night, I slept with one eye open. The ache of the wound and the ache of nearly dying blurred together. Fortunately, a good long rest in a safe enough spot was all that I required to finally flush the curse out of me. HP 10 out of 10. Just another cast of my aid spell, which had probably saved me from an even more agonizing phantom pain hours ago, and I was the closest to being back to full strength as I possibly could. HP 15/15. So I was finally ready to have my rematch with the sword and shield spectre that almost cut my leg off. I barely got the chance to get back on that first spectre that almost ripped my soul out of me. I won't let this become a habit. Unlike its great sword-wielding companion, I didn't dare to openly provoke it and led it to an ambush. This time, I patiently baited it towards where I wanted it. Prepared a chamber laced with glyphs carved from spectre dust and inscribed with one of the remnants, a fingertip bone, white and luminous. At the center, I placed a glass container of wildfire. Let it chase the faint presence some of its pals left for me to loot. Let it fall into my trap like the stupid mindless monster it was. Once again I whispered True Strike's incantation words as it flared, guiding my arrow through the best outcome I was capable of forcing into reality. When I fired, the shaft hit the glass dead center, providing the necessary spark for a detonation even more brutal than the one I had burned its greatsword friend. The bright green fire burst like a sun caught mid-birth. The spectre, clad in ghostly white, burned in silence yet clearly twisted in agony, its incorporeal form unraveling. And as I watched it burn, I wondered, was this how the Mad King felt when he set his enemies ablaze? Was there satisfaction, or just the silence that followed? But I wasn't alone. Not really. Call me crazy, but I believed that the instant dungeon was watching me now. Silently asking me the same question. Once I caught my breath, I recovered what remained before the still burning wildfire fully consumed them. 3 remnants. A silver ring that pulsed with a soft white glow. A clasp from its spectral cloak, still cold. And ashes, sacred smelling, almost holy despite their charred state. I pocketed them without hesitation, still having no idea what they meant. But I'd earned them, and I wasn't done yet. And so, after weeks that bled into each other in silence and solitude, my days returned to the same monotonous rhythm, scouting the maze, mapping its impossible geometry, retracing steps I knew by heart and yet never truly understood. Through that seemingly never-ending adventure, the changes to my body had finally culminated into something that I always wanted to put behind me. Ping. Congratulations. You have grown out of your child's body. Size. Small to medium. STR. 10, 0. EXP Athletics. +6. Dex. 11, 0. Proficient Save +2. EXP Acrobatics. +6. Pro. Sleight of Hand. +3. EXP Stealth. +6. Con. 10, 0. Without proper mirrors or anyone else to notice the changes, I was going by what the system informed me. Mainly glad that I was no longer suffering from any penalties to my physical stats. But I had also grown used to the rules of the instant dungeon. Had learned to respect them. But more than that, I had started to see the patterns underneath. The design behind the chaos. And still, no matter how many corners I turned or hidden paths I uncovered, the first spectre I came across remained absent. I much more expected to face the 6th and even the dungeon boss before I found that damn spectre that caught me when I was even weaker. It was hiding. Or worse, the dungeon was hiding it from me. At first, I suspected some error. A blind spot in my method. But eventually, I realized that this wasn't some coincidence. It was deliberate. The game, the system, the damn thing, it was withholding it from me like a carrot on a stick. By then, I already had 5 returning stones, their quiet weight a familiar presence in my pocket. They no longer felt like panic buttons. Not desperate lifelines clutched in fear, but cool, calculated options. Tools of choice. I could leave. I could rest. I could come back stronger. I could bide my time, sharpen my blade, stack my odds. And still, for what felt like the 1000th time I'd pondered it, I didn't leave. The air remained scorching, every breath like inhaling dry ash, but I no longer sweated like a panicked fool. My body had adapted, hardened. Skin no longer blistered, only bronzed and cracked. The heat clung to me like breath on the back of my neck, never ceasing, always watching. Waiting for a drop of temperature. The kind of drop that used to mark the presence of a spectre. But I hadn't felt one in weeks, and the silence was worse. Years without another voice, without a shape in the dark that wasn't an undead or a phantom of my own making. Survival was no longer my goal. I wasn't here to endure anymore. I was here to master it. And so, like a fool drunk on progress, I pressed deeper into the maze. Thinking I was the hunter. Fooling myself into thinking I was in control. That's when the dungeon reminded me it was alive. Because the 6th spectre didn't come to me. No matter how many traps I baited. No matter how long I wandered. So eventually, stupidly, I decided that going after it was the best path. Or so I foolishly thought. Maybe it was some kind of veiled magic. Maybe it was just my own arrogance, steering me without knowing. But at some point, I stopped wandering and started walking with purpose. Toward a section I couldn't remember passing through before. And once I stepped through an archway, I finally felt the temperature changing. Not cooler, but heavier. The heat took on a weight. It pressed down like a smothering hand. The air shimmered in waves, and I realized I had entered something old. Something true. The heart of the maze. A vast chamber, scorched black by ancient flame. The floor was cracked marble, spider-webbed with shadowy veins beneath a skin of stone. Dragonbone pillars loomed, spiraling toward a ceiling I couldn't see, like the ribs of a fallen titan. And at the far end, set above a dais carved into the rock itself, sat a throne. No, not a throne. A maw, twisted black iron, shaped like the open jaw of a dragon, its teeth jagged and melted, curled inward like the promise of death. Fire pulsed faintly between them. The heat here wasn't ambient anymore. It was watching me. The center of the instant dungeon. I thought while stopping myself as breath hitched. Shouldn't it be locked until I dealt with the specters? Still, no specter stood before me. No patrol, no lurking presence, no echo of steel in the shadows. But I knew the moment I saw that throne, that this was the stage. And the dungeon was done playing with me. Behind me, the corridors I had just walked began to twist, not mechanically, not with the grinding of gears, but like a dream folding in on itself. Like logic being rewritten. The marble shifted, the paths uncoiled like serpents swallowing their own tails. There would be no escape this time. My hand instinctively brushed the pouch at my hip, fingers grazing the cool shapes of returning stones. It should have felt like reassurance. But it didn't, and that's when I heard it. The laugh. Low, cracked, burning. It slithered through the air like oil over flame, not loud but present, winding between pillars, crawling through the marrow of the chamber. A pressure on my spine. A breath against my ear. Then came the shadows. Not cast, but crawling. Pouring across the floor, up the dragonbone pillars, moving against the light, like blood flowing uphill. And from the dark, it emerged. A silhouette, crowned in shadowy flames. Hair like wax melting in reverse. Robes stitched from living fire, tongues of black flame trailing behind like a funeral shroud. And at its hip, a blade that dripped screams, not blood, not steel, but the sound of people dying in agony, endless and spiraling. It didn't walk, it descended. A game window blinked into life above its head. Dungeon boss. The Mad Wraith King, medium undead, LV, 5. But fate, true to form, didn't come alone. From behind the pillars, two white figures stepped forward. Both glowing. Both wrong. Specters. The last two. And one of them, was that one. The first. The one who nearly ended me. The one who had clawed into my core and almost ripped my soul out. I knew it was the one, not by its featureless face, but by the way it moved. The cold silence in its stride. The gleam of its shield, still carrying the shape of that first nightmare. The other was new, but wrong in the same way. Both bound by strings of shadow. Both pulled forward like marionettes. Guarding the throne like Kingsguard made from bright fog and hate. Three of them against me alone. No time to prepare and no way to run. My hand tightened around the pouch at my side. I could leave. I could flee. I could survive. But I didn't move, not because I couldn't. But because this was the test. The next wall. The price of power. If I ran now, I'd always wonder. And so I stood my ground. The wraith raised its blackened hand, flame wreathing its wrist. And with a flick of one burning finger, it commanded them. So the specters lunged without hesitation and the fight finally began. I barely had time to move, rolling at the last moment and throwing myself behind the collapsed rib of a ruined pillar, dust blasting into my lungs as a blade tore through the air I had just occupied. A metallic screech echoed, steel against stone, sharp enough to rattle my ears. One of their weapons hissed past my calf, close enough to make the skin there ache from its unnatural cold. It didn't even cut me, and yet I felt it, the icy hunger, like it had still tasted a piece of me through the air alone. Clenching my teeth, I reached for two arrows in a single motion and snapped them against the bowstring. No time to think, no time to breathe. I loosed them both like reflexes made flesh. The first bounced uselessly off the nearest specter's armor, clattering to the floor. The second caught the other one in its shoulder, barely, but it staggered just enough to make me realize a bitter truth. My ranged attacks were a death sentence at close quarters. Switching the bow aside and reaching instead for my dragonbone club and my buckler, their familiar weight immediately grounded me in the moment like anchors against a storm. The air twisted. The heat, already unbearable, mutated. It thickened and pressed down over me. Changing shape. I looked up just in time to see the Wraith King glide from his throne like a nightmare made manifest. It didn't walk. It drifted. Flames curled behind its cloak like dying prayers. Burn them all. The voice crawled into my skull, low and damning, though its mouth never moved. Panic slammed into me, violent and raw. My hand shot for my last jar of wildfire, the glass already beginning to warm, ready to erupt if I hesitated even a moment too long. I hurled it, overarm, aimed not for precision but desperation. The pot soared past the wraith and detonated as it struck the marble, a violent blossom of green fire consuming half the chamber in emerald hellfire. For a second, just a breath, I thought that was it. That I had pulled some last-minute miracle and cheesed my way out of having to deal with the boss of the dungeon. But then it emerged. Stalking from the inferno as if born from it, the Wraith King's silhouette was not completely untouched by the blaze, but it wasn't the same sure win it had been against the specters up till that point. In a blink, it finally closed the distance, and before I could react, its burning hands grabbed me, as if its clutches could grasp my very ribs. Agony erupted. Every wound I had taken, every brush with death in this cursed dungeon, every moment I had been sliced, burned, pierced, or crushed, none of it compared to this. It was like being set on fire from the inside out. Like having my soul dragged across hot coals. If not for my reflexes, my uncanny dodge, to pull back when I did, I would have died right there. No second chances. -9 HP. 6/15 HP. And then I felt it, the true purpose behind the pain. It was trying to take something from me. Not my blood, not my limbs, me. I fought against it, clenched every muscle, tried to anchor my soul to my spine and resist. Constitution save failed. No, I'm not done yet. Heroic inspiration use expended. Constitution save succeed. I forced it back. Whatever tendrils of death it had slithered into me were severed just as I stumbled out of its grasp, dragging half a corpse but still upright. And gods be damned, I was still angry. By the way the Wraith King's maniacal laughter stopped, I knew it hadn't expected me to survive its first strike. The silence that followed wasn't fear, it was insulted disbelief. But one of its loyal servants immediately surged forth to correct that disappointment, spectral blade whistling through the air. Fortunately, my dragonbone buckler shield took the brunt of it, absorbing just enough force to keep me alive. Seizing the moment to disengage, I weaved between the looming columns, breaking line of sight where I could. Behind me, the Wraith King advanced, not fast, not furious, but inevitable. The slow crawl of death made manifest. Every step echoed with the weight of centuries. My hands trembled as I whispered the words of my mirror image spell, pouring every drop of flare into my movements, not just for the magical effect, but the assurance it granted me. -3 divine points. 3/6 DP. Then I tapped into my beguiling magic, peering out from behind the column. I picked my target, a lesser undead, the weakest link in the one I still had a debt to pay. Target failed its save. The spectre is now frightened. The effect was immediate. The spectre shrieked and fled, its smoky form retreating with desperate haste. I smirked, unable to resist the jab. Sucks being scared, doesn't it? Coward. Bring me his head. The Wraith King bellowed, the fury in its voice shaking loose dust from the ancient ceiling. Despite how the undead trembled beneath its command, my magical effect still held. It was then I saw the outline of my plan. Divide them. Let their numbers work against them. Pick one. Disable. Retreat. Repeat. If I could just isolate. Boom. The column behind which I was hiding exploded in a violent burst of green flame. The Wraith King had raised its hand again, conjuring another burst of twisted magic. That lit up like wildfire. Reality bent at the seams. 2 HP. 4/15 HP. If I hadn't thrown myself sideways, I would have been nothing more than ash. Even still, I choked on the acrid smoke and staggered right into a specter's swing, only dodging in time thanks to the warning pulse of my blind sight. I vanished into the smoke using my cunning action, and struck from the haze. My Dragonbone Club, empowered by True Strike, landed home. Sneak attack. -18 HP. That was the same specter I'd wounded earlier with my arrow. Catharsis surged through me as it shrieked and dissipated, collapsing into dust and silence. I retrieved its returning stone before it hit the floor. But still no time for healing my wounds, as the Wraith King came at me again, even faster this time, but my mirror image spell still held strong. Its strike passed through and after image left through a feint. Target failed its save. The specter is still frightened. Good boy. I nearly called out as I glanced at the cowering specter pressing itself into the far wall. Then I faced the Wraith King again and couldn't resist. You think I'm the one trapped in here with you? No, you're the ones trapped in here with me. Channeling Shalala into my club, feeling its weight shift, heavier, denser, more potent without sacrificing my skill with it, I followed with another true strike. -9 HP. Not much, nowhere near the damage I'd done with the wildfire pot earlier. But this wasn't about raw damage anymore. It was about preparation. Something that would eventually have its payoff. The Wraith King screeched with unholy rage and struck again. However, I still spun beneath its claws, dancing completely untouched. Target failed its save. The specter is still frightened. I darted away once more, leading it into another column's blind spot, then struck like a ghost myself once I vaulted from the other side. Sneak attack. -18 HP. Enough. The Wraith King howled, its voice a chorus of agony and hatred. You want my crown, my throne, then rule over ashes. Instead of pursuing me, it turned and hovered back to its throne, green flames sparking to life around its dragon-shaped altar. A ritual, a last-ditch failsafe. Desperate. Dangerous. The floor lit up. Channels of the dark liquid became green as they ignited one after the other, like veins of wildfire pulsing through the chamber. No. Through the maze. My maze. The one I had explored with blood and memory for years. The boss of the dungeon is about to destroy the entire maze. Stop it before it is too late. I surged forward, and froze at the second warning I received. Target succeed its save. The spectre is no longer frightened. Shit, I thought to myself, before facing the very same spectre I had come here to hunt. It had to be you. The same spectre I came here to hunt, the one that nearly killed me the first time, now stood before me again. From it I received no words, no hesitation. Just saw the purpose of protecting its king. We clashed. This time, I was stronger. Smarter. I had the defense, the offense, the tools. But it didn't need to win, just stall me long enough. And it did. It kept dodging rather than struck, forcing me into a slow, deadly dance. Just as the shadow of what I suspected was meant to evoke the Mad King was about to finish its ritual, I tried my last resort while secretly grasping a returning stone. Out of options, I gambled everything and decided to pull a talk no jutsu. I know, I invaded your home. I said, weaving every ounce of deception and persuasion I had into the words, hoping I was facing the echo of another famous Kingsguard. I know I slaughtered your companions. And I know you were just doing your duty when you nearly killed me. The spectre paused. I'm not asking you to betray your king. I'm asking you to think. That ritual, it won't just destroy me. It'll destroy everything. The maze. The others who dwell here. The dungeon itself. Will you let all that be destroyed? I braced myself, ready to strike the moment it lowered its guard or just outright ignored my words. Persuasion check succeed, but it actually surprised me simply by nodding. And then, it moved. Faster than I could. Like a streak of vengeful moonlight, it charged straight toward the Wraith King and drove its sword through its back. Ugh! The Wraith King cried out, spectral form flickering with pain. So, you are a coward and a traitor. Die. The ritual halted. The Wraith King turned, and with a single gesture, unmade the spectre. Dispelled it like a breath in winter. But as the Wraith laughed at its servant's short-lived defiance, that made it hesitate in completing its ritual. And that was all I needed. Calling on my action surge, I dashed forward with every last reserve of strength and fury. My club crackled with power through the great combination of both Shillelagh and True Strike, and my attack struck true. Critical hit. Sneak attack. Minus 25 HP. The Wraith King's form shattered in a cyclone of green fire and ash, its crown tumbling from the air and rolling to a stop beside me. It was over. Or so I thought. A whisper of steel cut the silence, not just any steel. A blade, black and ancient, coalesced in the Wraith King's reappearing hand even as its body fought against being dissolved. One final spiteful trick, bound to its death. It hadn't even used its weapon until now. Of course it hadn't. It was saving it, for this. I saw the arc of the sword coming before I even registered the movement, a spectral slash forged of hatred and death. A death meant for me. But it didn't aim for me. Not directly. It had learned. If it couldn't hit me, it would erase the space I stood in. The Wraith's blade struck the ground, and the world detonated, vaporizing stone like parchment before a forge. Minus 3 HP. And so the blast hurled me backward, ribs screaming, ears ringing, eyes barely focusing even with all my efforts to avoid the brunt of the explosion. My back slammed against the far wall of the chamber and I crumpled, breathless. For a heartbeat, maybe more, I lay still. 1/15 HP. This was it. My luck had spared all it could. I was out of tricks. One more spell, one more hit, one more step, and I'd. Spell storing ring attuned. The bronze ring on my finger, the one Elise had trusted me to awaken its magic, flared. A sudden pulse of magic, not from the Wraith's fire, but something colder. Not pain, but protection. Runes ignited across the old bronze like veins of moonlight through copper, and the world slowed as the stored magic surged into me. No time to think. No time to hesitate. My body just reacted and my hand snapped up as the Wraith's blade descended. A shimmer erupted between us, invisible but solid, a frozen barrier snapping into existence like a pane of force between life and death. The strike erupted once more, but this time, something stopped it, something protected me better than any armor could. Not just held, repelled. The burning explosion screeched off the frozen ward like a predator denied its prey, the Wraith recoiling, momentarily stunned. Barely able to inspect my body, I noticed that I now had thick layers of frost guarding me like a second skin. Glimpsing over my status window, I noticed how my health bar had received a momentary boost of plus 25. 1/15 HP plus 25 temporary HP. Minus 5 HP. 1/15 HP plus 20 temporary hit points. 1 hour of borrowed safety. 1 hour to live. 1 hour to kill. And I wasn't wasting a single one. Switching my Dragonbone buckler, I matched my Dragonbone club with my Valyrian steel dagger and proceeded to smash its ghostly blade aside and strike at its core with my magical blade. Minus 12 HP. Minus 4 HP. That finally seemed to send that grotesque reflection of the Mad King back to whatever afterlife it came from, as it screeched with enough malice to shake me a little. Wisdom save failed. You are now frightened. The target of your fear is no longer within sight. You are no longer frightened. Okay, more than just a little. Falling down to one new, I took my time to recover my breath. Too tired to properly investigate the wraith remains, too tired to even look around and make sure if I had finally won. Ping. I heard the usual notification sound, but kept focused on not just fainting. Constitution save failed. You gained 1 level of exhaustion. I needed a rest. Gods, I'd earned one. Not long after, my back ached from the stone. My ribs throbbed in time with my heartbeat. Faint scars that were darkened and with a cracked appearance that nearly reminded me of Greyscale. But the silence held, and the world hadn't ended in the hour I let myself collapse. I immediately noticed the disappearance of the frozen layers that had granted me the temporary boost I needed to survive. But Elisa's ring remained intact, its magic dimmed, but it had been awakened from slumber. As for the windows that still floated above me, they kept pulsing faintly at the edges like embers waiting to reignite. I didn't touch them at first. Just breathing, letting the weight of surviving settle in my bones. You have taken a short rest in a hard floor. HP have been restored 50% of its maximum. You may have another short rest before requiring to take a long one. 7/15 HP. Action surge use restored. I sat up slowly, gritting my teeth through the pain in my side. The bruises were deeper than I thought. Ribs, maybe. Nothing cracked, but every breath reminded me how close I'd been to death. Again, more windows unfurled, not red like warnings. These were proof of my progress. Quest completed. The hero's trials are not over. Time to face your biggest ordeal so far. Condition met. Defeat the instant dungeon's boss. Optional condition met. Do not use another returning stone. Reward. Level up 2 of your classes. Optional reward. Better loot. Cool. Do I get to choose which classes or? Class progress update. Assassin rank C+. The words flickered sharp and silver, like a dagger catching light. Evasion. You can nimbly dodge out of the way of certain dangers. When you are subjected to an effect that allows you to make a dexterity saving throw to take only half damage, you instead take no damage if you succeed on the saving throw and only half damage if you fail. You can't use this feature if you have the incapacitated condition. Reliable talent. Either through luck or your sheer commitment in avoiding any avoidable mistakes, whenever you make an ability check that uses your proficiency bonus, you never perform less than average. I let out a breath. Not a laugh, I didn't have the air for that, but something like amusement ghosted in my chest. No more flukes. No more hoping I got lucky. I'd bled enough to earn this. Every step, every strike, every silent breath taken behind a mark's back, it was adding up. A new window nudged in beside it. Congratulations. You have unlocked a new feat, Sharpshooter. You have mastered ranged weapons and can make shots that others find impossible. You gain the following benefits. Ability score increase. Your dexterity score increases by 1. Bypass cover. Your ranged attacks with weapons ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. Fire in melee. Being within 5 feet of an enemy doesn't impose disadvantage on your attack rolls with ranged weapons. Long shots. Attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage on your attack rolls with ranged weapons. I could see it already. Arrows whipping through gaps no sane archer would ever aim for, even with a warrior rushing toward them, weapon raised high. And I finally understood how my arrows' weight in the air they sailed through affected my accuracy. Class progress update. Fighter subclass, champion, rank D+. By focusing on the development of your martial prowess in a relentless pursuit of victory. You've learned to combine rigorous training with physical excellence to deal devastating blows, withstand peril, and garner glory. Whether in athletic contests or bloody battles, you strive for the crown of the victor. The frame shifted, less sleek, more ironclad. These weren't skills earned in the shadows. These were forged in grit and blood. Improved critical. Your strikes have become unnervingly precise, finding gaps in armor and weaknesses in your foe's stance with terrifying ease. Where others must rely on brute force or luck to land a crippling blow, your attacks glance off bones and slip between ribs like fate itself guides your hand. In addition, immediately after you score a critical hit, you can move up to half your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. Remarkable athlete. Thanks to your athleticism and physical fitness, you can brute force your way out of certain dangers. When you are subjected to an effect that allows you to make a strength or constitution saving throw to take only half damage, you instead take no damage if you succeed on the saving throw and only half damage if you fail. You can't use this feature if you have the incapacitated condition. Slowly exhaling, I felt something click inside me. The edge of my body, the timing in my breath, it was tighter now. Sharper. I could move faster, hit harder, react like muscle and mind were finally on the same page. Another window appeared next to everything else I got from my fighter class. Congratulations! You have unlocked a new feat, Defensive Duelist. You use weapons not just for offense but also for protection. You gain the following benefits. Ability score increase. Your dexterity score increases by 1. Parry. If you're holding a finesse weapon and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you may react and add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss you. You gain this bonus to your AC against melee attacks until the start of your next turn. That one made me smile. A real one, if brief. Not just a killer in the dark now, a duelist, a showman. And the best part, I didn't need to scream to win. I just needed a single moment where their weapons met mine, and failed. The windows lingered, waiting for acknowledgement. I didn't close them. Not yet. Let them stay. Let them burn into memory. Proof I'd made it. Instead, I pushed myself to stand. Slowly, I felt bones creaking under my strain as my muscles pulled tight. But I eventually stood. The world tilted a little, hunger, pain, fatigue, but I was stronger now than when I entered this chamber. That mattered. Every piece of me was built to survive, and with every kill, every risk, every inch of progress, I was becoming something more. And God's help the next fool who tries to stop me. Right as I was about to consider resting for another hour, a chime sounded, clearer than the others. Not urgent, not hostile. Almost triumphant. Congratulations. You have defeated the boss of the instant dungeon. You are now the master of this dungeon. My brow furrowed before I could help it. Master. What? The stone beneath me hummed. Subtle at first, then stronger. The walls shimmered, no longer crumbling or decayed. A slow ripple of restoration pulsed out from the wraith's broken remains, mending cracks and sweeping away blood as if the dungeon itself was breathing again for the first time in ages. As master, you may now exit the dungeon at will. As master, you may now decide if you want the time inside the instant dungeon to match your dimension of origin. This change can be altered if you so desire. Returning stones preserved. 6. The 6 stones began hovering in a gentle arc before me, the ones I had carried in with me. They pulsed, then rose into the air, drifting like stars toward the far wall where a circular staircase emerged from solid rock, ascending toward a sealed archway now glowing faintly silver. Treasury, I realized. But before I could drag my aching body up the steps, I turned back toward the wraith's remains. Nothing solid had survived, only mist and rags drifting through the air like soot caught in a breeze. But I could feel it, a residue of power. I reached out with one hand, channeling everything I'd learned, the instinct and theory braided into me by blood, sweat, and months learning everything I could from Tobho's Forge and the Alchemist Guild's laboratory. It was then I felt how my reliable talent changed my way of thinking, how I managed to avoid all the avoidable mistakes whenever I worked with something I had already had enough experience in knowing how things were supposed to work. That combined with my guidance cantrip, and I felt I could do anything I set my mind on. Arcana check succeed. The mist thickened at my touch, swirling into my palm, coalescing into a fine layer of ashen dust that shimmered faintly violet when the light hit it just right. You have obtained Wraith Dust, rare alchemical ingredient. As it seems when a wraith is killed, its form disperses into a fine mist, scattering motes of necrotic energy. Wraith dust was invisible to the untrained eye but resonates with dark arcane potential. Alchemists, necromancers, and rune forgers alike should prize it for rituals involving death, binding or shadow. Highly volatile in raw form. I sealed it into a pouch, near the spectre remains I managed to harvest beforehand, with trembling fingers, still kneeling in silence. This wasn't just loot. It was a door to more power, more danger, more answers. Before I could think of it further, another window flickered within my sights. Ping. Dungeon treasury unlocked. Time remaining inside. Infinite as master. Finally, something in this world that I owned outright, not by name, not by birthright, but by surviving what would have killed any other bastard who stumbled in. I stood up again. Or tried to. My legs protested, every bruise flaring back to life, but I gritted my teeth and pushed up. The dungeon no longer tested me. Now it was offering tribute. The 22nd of September 2020. The 24th of September 2020. The 30th of September 2021. The 4th of July 2022. The 1st of January 2025. Hope this chapter is of your liking. Anything you wish to ask, feel free to do so. Check out my auxiliary chapter if you still haven't. Thanks as always for your attention and please be safe. Any problems with my writing, just point them out and I will correct them as soon as possible. Your gift is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. Creation is hard, cheer me up. Vote for me. I tagged this book, come and support me with a thumbs up. Like it, add to library, have some idea about my story. Comment it and let me know. Daichi_TBR 193 creators, thoughts. 62 comments 0 vote. Start of the festivities and the prince's name day. Durrandon Baratheon's POV. Following the staircase, I noticed how it curved upward, its black stone slick with faint silver runes. They pulsed beneath my feet, not with menace, but recognition, as if the dungeon itself acknowledged my right to ascend. The top of the stairs opened into a vast circular chamber, silent and still as a tomb. Blinking in amazement as I stepped forward, torchlight bloomed from sconces embedded in the walls, illuminating the space in a steady, golden glow. Every flame danced without wind, perfectly still. I didn't understand how this place actually sustained itself, but I couldn't argue with the breathtaking sight above. Mosaic tiles arranged into a massive map of Westeros across the ceiling. The three-headed red dragon of House Targaryen spiraled at its edges, wings spread wide around the continents. No dust here, no decay, only polished obsidian tiles beneath my boots, etched with flowing Valyrian glyphs that shimmered like rivers of quicksilver. The chamber walls curved inward like the shell of a great egg, veined with recessed lines, dormant conduits, slumbering still. The air here felt ancient. Not stale, no, it was too pure for that, but reverent, as though every breath might disturb the ghosts of those who'd once tread similar paths. And in the center, as if placed on an altar, stood a large treasure chest with 6 returning stones orbiting it like a halo of stars. I approached cautiously, my eyes narrowing. The chest's hinges bore the rippled texture of folded metal, glimmering faintly with enchantment. It was unmistakable, Valyrian steel, paired with the dark, fossil-like sheen of dragonbone. A piece of history, reforged into something far more valuable than gold. Still, I wasn't about to throw caution to the wind, so I quickly knocked my last arrow and fired. Clank. The arrow bounced harmlessly off. No teeth, no maw, just silence. Hey, had to make sure it wasn't a mimic. I muttered, thinking back to more than a few Dark Souls trauma dumps. I stepped forward, knelt, and placed both hands on the lid. It was cool to the touch, heavy, resistant, but it yielded to me. My shadow fell across its gleaming contents just as the 6 returning stones dissolved midair, spiraling downward into streaks of raw magic, coalescing into form. A notification ping echoed, like the tolling of crystal against flame. Returning stones redeemed. Treasure claimed. 6/7. I didn't even flinch. Yeah, the stone I'd used had saved my life. Losing a treasure in exchange for breathing. Totally worth it in my books. So you would get no bitterness from me. One by one, I reached out and took hold of what was mine. Valyrian steel shortsword. I drew the blade, and believe it or not, but the room actually dimmed slightly. The steel drank in the light, no shine, no gleam, just a hungry, flawless black. It felt weightless in my hand, balanced like it was made for me. I gave it a slow swing through the air, clean, silent. And yet, I could feel the resistance cut away like paper. Compared to it, even the best castle-forged blades or most of Mott's work felt somewhat crude. Forged in what I believe to be old Valyria, or reforged from another piece of the magical metal, it bears no name. Its hilt is plain, dragonbone wrapped in black dragonhide, its pommel devoid of any kind of heraldry. Surprisingly, this wasn't even the most impressive of my rewards. Enduring Valyrian Codex. Bound in dragonhide, clasped with blackened steel, the tome pulsed faintly with contained power. The crest of the Valyrian freehold marked its cover, proud and untamed. I flipped it open and immediately felt something click, a thread tugging at my mind. High Valyrian script flowed like liquid fire across the pages. Arcane principles, glyph weaving diagrams, elemental resonance theories, all laid out with surgical precision. This wasn't myth. This wasn't some mystic's ramblings I suspect I would find being hidden by the maesters at the Citadel. It was science. Far more refined, if not a bit too theoretical, to what I've learned from Tobomod and Halline. Half the book remained blank, but the pages were spellbound, resistant to age, decay, and tampering. I could feel it waiting for my discoveries, as if daring me to fill it. Challenge accepted. Alchemy jug. A strange, sturdy and unmarked ceramic jug, capped with a cork. As I shook it, I noticed how it sloshed. But once I uncorked it, I found nothing. Yet it felt full. Full of possibility. Very similar to my handy spice pouch. Yeah, I'd be playing with this one later. Mage's bracers. Twin bands of silver, shaped like serpent-like dragons devouring their own tails. The moment I touched them, they thrummed, vibrations I felt in my bones. After a brief moment of experiencing them, I noticed how it seemed to speed up the casting of my cantrips. Right now, at best that meant true strike, but I had plans. Oh, I had so many plans. Mask of the Changeling, white porcelain, featureless, yet unnerving. I turned it over in my hands, and felt something watching me. Before I could second guess it, I pressed it to my face. The change was instant. No light, no sound, just shift. The mask bonded to my skin, molding to my thoughts. My reflection in the obsidian tile stared back, taller, leaner, older. A different face, a different voice. With a flicker of will, I morphed again. A girl with silver hair. A bearded old man. A sellsword. A squire. A white walker, or at least how they were depicted in the TV show. It wasn't an illusion. It was deeper than that. My skin became a lie. My voice changed. Even my bones adjusted. The only restrictions were my clothing and equipment, that still left a clue of who I really was. That and how my stats didn't change, regardless of how tall and how bulky I made myself appear. Honestly, it really reminded me of the character creation in Skyrim, which stole several if not hundreds of hours from my previous life every time I wanted to make another character. A whisper filled my mind in some ancient tongue, soft as breath. Be who you must, or who they need you to be. And right then, I understood its true gift. It wasn't a mere disguise, but free freedom to continue playing the game however I wanted to. Sure, I could make myself a couple of years younger in order to avoid drawing suspicion from everyone who noticed how much I had grown in a single night. But if I ever grew tired of being me, as ludicrous as that might sound, I was merely a disposed body away from assuming another identity. Regardless, for now that was neither here nor there, so I continued to appraise the rest of my rewards. Mark of holding. A medieval syringe with a needle, filled with starlight ink. For some reason, I immediately held the needle to the skin of my chest, pressing the needle there for what felt like a long while. When the process was complete, the needle's ink produced a tattoo, which appeared as a grinning face, etched in colors. Then, gone. Inventory feature unlocked. I was admittedly surprised at that. Inventory. I asked out loud and suddenly a brown box appeared in front of me. I then saw that this new box was labeled inventory. Duh. It had several empty boxes and something told me I would need all of them. Slowly staring down at my collection of treasures which I couldn't risk having anyone else to find, with the inventory box in front of me. I took out one of them and then pressed it against the box, pushing it forward. Golden ripples appeared in the box and the alchemy jug disappeared from my hands and reappeared in the inventory labeled as such. 12500 cell B. Oh yeah, I couldn't help myself from letting out an excited smile. This was going to come in handy. After storing what I wasn't equipping, I immediately noticed how the location of the red keep lit up on that map over in the ceiling. It just dawned on me that I still had several castles with their own instant dungeons to explore. Oh, boy. Soon after, a section of the wall shifted before me, in the opposite direction where the stairs from the dungeon's boss brought me. A massive archway, the size of a wall gate, carved directly into the obsidian. Its frame was ringed with glyphs. At its center I saw only stillness, its surface like black mercury, unmoving, awaiting command. Portal node. Dormant. Connected to. Red keep. A breath caught in my throat once I saw an object spawning right before me. The key materialized in my hand, a slender thing, seemingly made of glass or crystal, shimmering faintly in the morning light. As I focused on it, a soft ping echoed, and a new window appeared. Magical key for gaining access to an instant dungeon. At the moment there are no near entrances that can be found. It was a key, slender and apparently made of crystal, very similar to the one that put me in this path of dungeon delving. Despite all the pain and near-death experiences this first dungeon put me through, I was beyond excited to keep getting stronger. For now, before finally returning to the real world, to attend my own name day tournament, I still had some interest in staying around and exploiting the time difference between here and outside. Looking around the chamber, I was already plotting. With the right materials, this could be my sanctum, my forge, my lab, my war room, my escape. And with the maze itself of this entire dungeon, my own personal kingdom. Yeah, this place had potential. Finally, after years of being caged by it, time now bent to my will here. The world outside waited, still and unknowing, while I carved days into weeks, weeks into something else. I wasn't hungry, not really, not when I had my goodberries, the alchemy jug, and the handy spice pouch. Not when I learned to roast rat meat with honey, oil, and a pinch of saffron like it was a feast. Taking meals apart, to test what happened when I paired sweet with bitter, salt with pepper, fat with heat. It quickly became a ritual for me. Hunt in the maze, roast, season, stash the excess into my inventory until I had dozens of rations, all better than most meals served to squires in the Red Keep. I turned sustenance into science. Poison was at first too limited in output to be truly reliable, half an ounce a day, barely enough to coat a dagger. Until I discovered a way to stash it away at my inventory easy for me to grab whenever I needed it. As for acid, it made locks hiss open to deactivate traps and rat carcasses melt into bones. Oil and flame were tools too, but it still didn't compare to what I could do once I got my hands in some glass pots of wildfire. With the alchemy jug, I could plan meals and mayhem. But when I wasn't cooking, I was also cutting. The Valyrian steel shortsword had a name now. Not one I spoke aloud, not even in my thoughts, but one I felt. The blade called for motion, fast, decisive, sharp. Not like a longsword's brute grace that required stronger hands to be wielded properly, this was the tool of an assassin, a duelist, a ghost. The Valyrian steel dagger I had found long before it was smaller still, needed less balance, more intent. It hummed differently, sang when drawn in a tight arc, when held in reverse grip. In my offhand, it whispered of throat slitting and backstabbing. Magical steel was good, but precision was better. I kept casting True Strike again and again in rapid succession, relying on my mage's bracers to keep it flowing. The cantrip itself wasn't flashy, just a shimmer in my focus, a hush before the lunge, but it now finally made me confident in fighting my opponent head on. It taught me the rhythm, to wait, cast, step and finally strike. Like a metronome dictating the flow of my dance. Sometimes I practiced with my eyes closed, feeling overformed through my blind sight. Sometimes with a blindfold, sometimes in pitch black. I started to more clearly see attacks before I made them. Not prophecy, just preparation. And when I wasn't training in steel, I was training in selves. The mask of the changeling shifted with thought and touch. I learned how to pull not just the faces of those I've ever laid my sight on over my bones, but also their essence. Robert came first. Easy to mimic, the weight in his walk, the slur in his bowels, the stance that betrayed his still present inhuman strength. I paced like him, drank like him, laughed like him until the echo nearly turned my stomach. Jamie was harder. He walked like he owned every room, chin tilted just so. The mask let me wear his face, but not his pride. That took study and posture. Barristan moved like a ghost, always still, always ready. His voice was steady, his presence like granite. I tried him only a few times, but I still felt unworthy. Tobo Mott and Halline were subtler. The way Tobo pinched his brow when he thought, how his speech slowed when he was dealing with any noble trying to haggle his price. The way Halline's hands trembled when he spoke too fast to his fellow alchemists, how he hid fear behind flamboyance whenever the subject of their guild's current state was brought up. I copied all their tics, their tones. Practiced entire conversations, monologues, arguments. If I ever needed to wear any of these men's skins, I would do so seamlessly. That is, if I ever managed to reliably get the appropriate clothes and equipment necessary to corroborate with my act. Incidentally, the enduring Valyrian Codex remained resistant. I could read it, but truly understanding its depths was another thing. Sometimes, I could even swear that the ink moved when I wasn't looking. Still, progress came. Arcane theory, metallurgical rites, fragments of conjuration and warding rituals. Took me some time to understand that it was no mere book, but a seed to a higher understanding. Each time I turned the pages and read the same segment for who knows how many times, more meaning bloomed. It didn't want to teach me, but to test me. But knowledge was patient, and so was I. For I did not tire, but kept sharpening myself instead. By the end of that first month, I wasn't just stronger, I was shaped. Like a blade drawn from the forge and dipped in cold oil. Quenched, if the word fitted. Unfortunately, despite my ability to alter my flesh, I suspected that I still aged beneath my mask. But even time, I realized, could be negotiated, not forever, but just enough. The Valyrian Codex wouldn't yield its deepest truths yet, but it had taught me enough. Enough to begin experimenting with what I assumed I had finally grasped. Even if just for common things, barely more magical than a clever lie. Still, there was power in lies, and so I started with scent. It began as a joke. I'd already taken to wearing different faces while mimicking courtly pleasantries, lords and ladies, knights and squires, all of them dancing around the truth behind a mask of charm. But charm, I realized, was a spell in and of itself. I had felt it every time I cast my friend's cantrip, that gentle pressure behind the eyes, the soft shimmer that laced a voice with honey. It wasn't real friendship, but it was close enough to pass. So I tried to bottle it. It took trial and error. Not just in the scraps of alchemy I had picked up from watching and reading, but in emotion. I crushed herbs known to stir memory, lavender, red mint, a drop of clove oil for heat. Then I turned to my stockpile, the magical fungus harvested from dungeon depths, a few flakes of spectre dust mixed into the base to help veil the enchantment, and a single trace of wraith dust dissolved into honeyed alcohol to bind the effect to the user's presence. Into a phial no bigger than a coin, I sealed the brew. One whiff made me feel just a little warmer, a little more seen. Not magic in itself, not yet. Then I brought out my tinker's tools, not hammers and anvils, but needles, clamps, precision vials, and fine wire loops. The gear of a magician disguised as a medieval craftsman. I siphoned in a sliver of raw arcane essence, channeled through my tools, and then, finally, I wove the faintest echo of the friend's enchantment into the liquid. It finally clicked all together. You've successfully crafted 10 doses of perfume of bewitching. A smile in a bottle. Deception without detection. Granted, it only worked on the weak-willed, but so did most things in this world. And after scent came insight. True strike had become more than a crutch. It was a companion, a pulse of certainty to compensate for my physical shortcomings, a narrowing of possibilities into one inevitable point of contact. But in some fights, I had luck stacked against me. And I needed that clarity, not later, not with time to think, but now. So I tried to cheat the balance of things. I melted scraps of silver wire with the precision heat of my alchemical torch, twisting the softened strands into delicate curls. Clear quartz, harvested from dungeon cracked stone I found almost a year ago, served as the core. Into each I etched a tiny eye, no larger than a tear. And inside, where no one could see, I layered a dusting of remnants, cold spectral residue from defeated shades, trapped like memory in glass. I shaped them into pendants no bigger than my thumbnail, light enough to conceal at my throat or wrists. Each one linked to a tiny sliver of my own experience, the muscle memory of every moment I had paused to strike just right. The enchantment was simple, crude even, just a single-use reroute per day. If a blow faltered despite all odds, the pendant would nudge it. Not toward brilliance, but just as my reliable talent did for my skills and tools, toward adequacy. A floor, not a ceiling. You've successfully crafted 5 pendants of hindsight. They would not make me sharper. But they would make me steadier. And sometimes, that was more than enough. Aside from easily impressing nobles and peasants, neither magic item would impress the likes of Tobo Mott, nor the alchemists, nor even a hedge wizard, as much as that wounded my pride. But they worked. And more than anything, they were mine. I began making more of them in the following weeks, perhaps to trade for something else equally as valuable, perhaps to gift someone that did my bidding, perhaps just to see if I could replicate the feeling. And so I kept mixing, etching and tinkering. It was strange, addictive in its own way. Not just to use magic, but to make it. To pull something permanent from the ephemeral. Each item became a mark one would leave on the world, but also a whisper of the deeper magic still out of reach. And though I had miles to go before I'd match Tobo Mott, or the alchemist, much less the ancient forgers of old Valyria, the first spark had caught. Ping. Class progress update. Artificer, rank D. Replicate magic item. You have learned arcane plans that you use to make magic items with your tinker's tools. Finally, the spark didn't just catch, it took root. I felt it like a click behind the eyes, a piece of the world shifting into place. The glyphs and diagrams I've been only playing with weren't abstract anymore. They were blueprints, possibilities, orders waiting to be built. It was like the system had finally stopped mocking me for not dedicating enough time with my artificer work and finally started to speak. Known infusions available, 4 quarters. Goggles of night. Sending stones. Repeating shot. Returning weapon. Infusion limit. 2 active. Select 2 infusions to maintain through arcane calibration until your next long rest. I didn't hesitate. Goggles of night, a practical necessity. Dark vision without draining my magic reserves, without wasting points on a spell that had always to be up to make the best use of it. Sending stones, because information is a weapon, and communication is control. If I could keep in touch with an ally, or manipulate a pawn from a distance, even across kingdoms, with just a few words. That was power. That was leverage only greenseers or glass candles could compare to. The other 2 could wait. Repeating shot was promising, runic reloading for crossbolts, a magical enhancement to keep the shots flowing. Would have to wait and see how much of a great job Tobomot would do with the dragonbone hand crossbow I'd commissioned from him. And returning weapon was poetry in motion. The thought of hurling my Valyrian steel dagger and having it reappear back into my hand like a trained hawk made something in me ache with want. But they weren't essential. Not yet. So I immediately locked the first two in. The arcane patterns etched themselves into memory, not just my mind but my body. My fingers twitched with the rhythm of glyphs, muscle memory laying down new tracks, instinctually reaching for tools I'd never quite known how to use until now. Pulling out from my pouch two smooth, flat dragonbone pieces I'd picked up from the work I had to bring the necessary material for Tobomot to work with, and had never really found any proper use for them until now. Nothing more than polished pebble-like pieces at a glance, but they hummed in my hand now, reacting to the current flowing through me. I etched them slowly, runes tight and delicate, forming mirrored sigils on each surface. I used the soldering tip of my Valyrian steel dagger enchanted with a fragment of residual magical ingredients that I still had available, dragging arcs of raw energy along the two pieces like a painter with liquid silver. Whispering as I worked, feeding it will, intention, connection. Not just magic, but meaning. When I pressed the two together, they pulsed in tandem, just once, and I knew they were bound. No matter the distance, they would speak. Next, the goggles. I scavenged lenses from a broken spyglass I had never replaced in my thieves' tools, cracked but salvageable. Fused them to a wire frame, then wrapped the bridge with worn leather and riveted it with bits of brass pulled from discarded pieces of traps from the instant dungeons maze that I've broken apart. The enchantment came last. Two arcane sigils etched into the inside of the lenses, one to filter light, the other to translate shadow into shape. I sealed them with a drop of my own blood mixed with shadow black ink, the way I once heard Tobo bragging to one of his apprentices that the Cohoric did when binding sight into steel. When I slipped them over my eyes after finding a dark section of the dungeon, the world didn't just go dark once I opened my eyes, it revealed itself just as it did with my dark vision spell. The pitch black of the dungeon walls shifted into a sharp grayscale, every edge and surface painted with crisp clarity. I blinked, and something in me aligned, like these had always been mine, just waiting to be built. Now, about my new spell. It wouldn't grant me the victory in a duel. It didn't even make me stronger, faster, or more resistant to anything that could hurt me. But disguise self. It was liberation, not from danger, but from inconvenience. I'd already come as close as I could get with mastering the physical shift of hair, eye, posture and height, without testing myself against the perception of others. But clothes, equipment, that had always been a problem from day one of me putting on the mask of the changeling. No one would believe a common boy in silks or a lordling in mud-stained rags. Even the sharpest face faltered when paired with the wrong costume. Now, finally, I could fix that. -2 arcane points. 0 halves AP. The spell tasted like smoke and felt like thread being pulled tight across my skin. I watched in the warped reflection of the polished black walls of the treasure chamber as my improvised patchy wool shirt shimmered, twisting itself into the dark leathers of a city watchman. A slight pressure on my chest and waist, illusory armor and a belt of tools I didn't have. Touch it, and it'd vanish like mist under sunlight. But from a distance. In shadow. In motion. No one would know. This was freedom. The power to actually become someone else in a heartbeat. A ghost in borrowed clothes. I wouldn't have to spend hours stitching disguises by candlelight unless I truly needed them. Now, I could infiltrate, mislead, vanish, then reappear as someone else entirely. It wasn't just magic. It was the final piece of the mask. And just like that, the dungeon felt smaller. Not useless. Not irrelevant. Just complete. I had earned my way out. But also had taken more than what I came for. Not with just blood or strength or stealth, but with understanding. And understanding. That was the one kind of power that no lord, no knight, no king could ever take from me. And so, after quite some time since I first stepped in this instant dungeon, I would finally lay my eyes upon the nostalgic sights of the Red Keep again. Title: Durrandon Baratheon, Crown Prince Medium Human, Neutral. Level: 6 Proficiency Bonus, +3. Class: Assassin C+, Glamour D+, Champion D+, Hunter C, Artificer D. HP: 17 Aid Spell, Armor Class, 15 Dragon Bone Buckler Shield. Divine Points: 6 Max Tier, 1. Primal Points: 14 Max Tier, 2. Arcane Points: 2 Max Tier, 1. Speed: 3.5 miles per hour 30 feet. Senses: Blind Sight 10 feet, Dark Vision 60 feet, Goggles of the Night. Traits: Evasion, Reliable Talent, Improved Critical, Remarkable Athlete. Feats: Sharpshooter, Defensive Duelist. STR: 10, 0. EXP, Athletics, +6. Dex: 13 plus 1 proficient save plus 3. EXP acrobatics plus 7. Pro sleight of hand plus 4. EXP stealth plus 7. Con 10 0. Int 16 plus 3 proficient save plus 6. Pro arcana plus 6. Pro history plus 6. Pro investigation plus 6. Nature plus 5. Religion plus 5. Wis 15 plus 2. Pro animal handling plus 5. EXP insight plus 8. Medicine plus 4. EXP perception plus 8. EXP survival plus 8. Cha 19 plus 4. EXP deception plus 10. Intimidation plus 6. EXP performance plus 10. Pro persuasion plus 7. Cantrips. Friends vicious mockery, shillelagh, thorn whip, mending, guidance, true strike. First tier divine spells. Sleep, hideous laughter, heroism, comprehend languages, charm person, mirror image asterisk. First tier primal spells. Goodberry, hail of thorns, longstrider, animal friendship. Second tier primal spells. Dark vision, aid. First tier arcane spells. Detect magic, purify food and drink, disguise self. The Red Keep was sleeping. Not because of the cold, harsh winter, those winds were still months away, due after my name day. But that's precisely why, with so many festivities at the near horizon, most required the proper night of rest in order to be at their best to enjoy it all. Still, soft candlelight still glowed behind some high windows, but the halls were quiet, hushed like a cathedral of power, too used to whispers and secrets to ever truly rest. No guards stirred, no servants blinked awake. I didn't need to rush. I had all night, and the city wouldn't dare move without me until dawn. And so I finally emerged from the instant dungeon's portal, alone and unseen, safely within my own chambers. My hand brushed against the cold stone, and just like that, the way back sealed itself, silently enough to not disturb even my trained cats that still slept on top of my bed. The dungeon, my crucible, had released me. Or perhaps it was more appropriate to say I had taken my leave. My steps were silent as I roamed through my own room like a shade, storing everything of value to me inside my inventory. The fine clothes were laid out already, ceremonial blacks and golds for the morning feast, the colors of House Baratheon, as expected. But I had other plans. Having not been long since I took my last long rest, curiosity still got the best of me when I wondered how much control I had over where the instant dungeon's portal could take me in this castle. I had some people in mind I would like to visit before the mayhem of tomorrow festivities took my entire day. Having said that, my first stop had to be Elise. She lay curled beneath her very decorative and Aaron-themed blanket, one hand tucked beneath her cheek, the other splayed across a book she hadn't finished. A candle had burned itself out by her desk. The room smelled faintly of ink, old paper, and the rosewater she preferred. The ring, the bronze one she'd given me, etched with some ancient first men charm, rested cold in my hand. She'd handed her late mother's heirloom freely, without knowing what it could truly do but trusting I could be the one to learn. She might not know, but it had saved my life. And now, I hoped it could at least save her time, save her breath, let her read and decipher a dozen ancient tongues without begging Pycelle to lend his unimaginative commentary. I slipped the ring between the pages of the open book she'd fallen asleep reading, tax structures in the early reign of Baelor the Blessed. Light reading, I see. But also, I noticed a small diary, which I swear by the 7 was open before I got there. Not that I got to know any embarrassing secret she might be hiding, just several ramblings on how she could finally beat me in the game of cards I created myself. Hey, good luck kid. I thought with a smirk while closing her diary. Beside both books and her bronze ring, I placed the dragonbone sending stone. Smooth, obsidian black, a lion carved into its surface with a storm surrounding it, the way my sigil might one day be. If she kept this token with her at all times, it whispered 2 things to anyone clever enough to look, especially Baelish who viewed himself as a queenmaker and would believe she was an investment worth nurturing. I lingered for a moment longer, watching her chest rise and fall. She'll rise faster than they expect. I thought before motioning for the instant dungeon's portal to open. Perhaps even faster than I am giving her credit for. Once again slipping between dimensions to better help me save time while moving around the Red Keep, I reached for Rhaenys this time. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed how her chamber door remained guarded, but the bed inside was empty. She was probably still with Varys, learning how to disappear and how to know everything that was worth knowing in King's Landing. She was clever enough not to need magic, and Varys was cautious enough to be against its existence, much less use. So I left the simplest gift I could for her, one of my many pendants of hindsight, folded discreetly into her secret stash where she frequently hid the dagger Varys gave her like a secret she hadn't found yet. If she used it right, it would let her see through others' mistakes, or hopefully even her own. Not much else to do here, so I just moved on again, this time looking for my cute little half-siblings, Lan and Joanna. They shared a room, though the maids insisted they hated it. But now they were both curled at opposite ends of the same room in different beds, cheeks red and fists still clenched. The two twins had fought again. Maybe because they sensed what was coming, how I was about to leave for Castle Rock. Even without words, children knew when something was ending. I knelt by the bedside of both, brushing tangled golden hair from Joanna's angelic face while Lan snored, mouth open. Somehow, he'd ended up wearing one of my old sashes like a knight's cloak. Letting out a slow breath and touching each of their brows, I whispered in their ears. Stay wild, stay loud, but don't forget me. Okay, that was a bit more sentimental than I had planned, but still, I felt like after everything I went through before clearing my first instant dungeon, I emotionally needed to make sure they hadn't grown up while I was away. But that was that, I still had a few more people I would like to visit, namely my parents. Since despite their marriage, I knew both the king and queen were perfectly fine with sleeping in separate rooms, that's why I would have to make 2 stops. First one being my mother, the unmatched beauty that was Queen Cersei. I will be totally honest, with all the freedom and practice I got from using my mask of the changeling, I was almost set on doing something that would make even the most traditionalist Targaryen blush, but once I noticed that Cersei wasn't alone, I fortunately had a better judgment. Uncle Jaime, for all his flaws, was genuinely in love with his own sister. The tragedy of his character being that, if not for the Mad King denying her marriage with Rhaegar just to spite Tywin, she would have been more than content in forgetting about her twin brother. And even now, as uncomfortable as I'm sure it must have been for Bran to look back when he caught them both in the act, it was clear to me through my insight skill that Jaime was the literal version of how Cersei viewed herself as a man. She didn't love him, she loved who she could have been. Pretending to be Uncle Jaime just to realize my previous life dream of having some good time with the Lioness Queen would be counterproductive if I ever hoped to free Jaime of her. Still, I would have to find a way to get him out of her shadow if I wanted to make him see his sister's true self and intentions. But that's not a plan I would like to keep hatching while they might very well be conceiving this reality version of Tommen. Believe it or not, I'm not really into this voyeurism stuff. Now, praying to the 7 gods above that I would be spared from seeing another one of my parents naked, I reached for Robert. And, he was gone. No guards at his chamber. No snoring behind locked doors. The man who had sired me had probably vanished into wine, into brothels, into memory. Not that I really cared, or even blamed him. Poor fool was stuck between the ghost of a woman who I believe he might have the slightest of suspicion didn't really love him back, but still had in his eyes suffered a terrible fate in Rhaegar's hands, and a queen that despite her beauty treated him as if he had forced her into marriage. Still, I smiled while thinking to myself. Hold in there, Pops. Anytime soon you will have your prayers answered once Balon Greyjoy declares his stupid rebellion. Having no one else I actually wanted to visit, I thought about how I still had a long night before dawn, and decided it was finally time to accept my destiny as Robert's son. Soon after, I went through his less luxurious old clothes and picked out some fine garb that didn't scream out royalty, but still whispered loud enough about wealth. Some use of my disguise kit and not even Robert would recognize his own property. Activating the mask of the changeling, my fingers burned, my skin tightened, bones stretched, eyes warped, shadows folded inward. In the mirror's silvered glass of the king's chambers, the crown prince child disappeared and in his place stood a man. With both sets of storm blue eyes, complete coal-black hair and broad shoulders. The heir my father expected. No mismatched colors. No blood of dragons. Just a nameless yet wealthy man in the right shape. The gold I had not stored away at my inventory jingled softly in the pouch at my hip. Enough for expensive wine, whores, and favors. So I slipped into the alleys of King's Landing, cloaked in a false body and real coin, and whispered. Happy name day, to me. The streets of King's Landing hours before sunrise were nothing short of treacherous, but never for me, especially not tonight. Wrapped in the guise of a wealthy, nameless noble with storm blue eyes and the gait of a man used to command, I walked with a swagger that parted the beggars like waves and silenced the footpads before they even dared step close. My coin pouch didn't jingle by accident, it jingled in rhythm, deliberate, loud enough to warn and entice, but never foolishly. I passed the smoky windows of lake taverns and the flickering candles of old stone inns. Through the tangle of alleyways in the street of silk, each brothel I passed called with open doors and painted lips. Silken voices offered themselves from balconies, but I wasn't tempted. Not by them, only one door called to me tonight, Chataya's. Her brothel was no den of desperation like the others. Its entrance sat behind a lacquered red door, flanked by carved wooden dragons whose eyes gleamed like garnets. Incense drifted through golden lattices, and rich velvet hung from arching beams. It didn't smell like sex or sweat. It smelled like myrrh, cinnamon, and something sweeter, mystery, perhaps. Inside, silk-robed girls floated through candlelight like living dreams. None were loud, none desperate. There was laughter, yes, but refined, well-practiced. This was a house of art, not just carnal trade. And there she was. Chattaya, Madam of Summer, Romance, LV, 4. Chattaya, the jewel of the silk streets. Dark-skinned and radiant, with eyes like polished amber and hair bound in golden rings. She wore violet silk tonight, wrapped like a serpent around her curves. She moved like royalty, or maybe something older. A priestess of love. Her gaze slid over me as I entered, curious but calm. My lady, Jaskier Dandelions, humble to finally meet you. I said with a roguish smile as I gave her an unnecessarily deep bow. I seek not just a night of warmth, but the pleasure of your company. I'm told the owner herself still entertains, rarely, and only if she likes the scent of a man's gold and the sound of his words. She smirked, smooth and unreadable. You bring sweet words and heavy coin. Not many do both, no. I offered her the heavy pouch from my belt. Gold for your time, and only your time. If by the end of it you still wish to dismiss me, you'll not hear a complaint. But I'd regret leaving this city without sharing a pleasant conversation with the most beautiful woman it has. She glanced at the pouch, then at me. Her fingers brushed mine as she took it, weighing both the gesture and the gold with that uncanny poise of hers. Your mouth speaks like a poet, but your hands, they speak of steel. She observed. Come, I'll see where this night leads. She led me upstairs herself, past rooms that whispered with laughter and moans, past silken drapes and oil lamps that cast dancing shadows. The room she chose for us was one of her finest, cushioned floors, wine-chilled in silver, a low burning hearth, and a bed large enough for a small army. But no one followed us. No giggling girls, but also no spying eyes and ears. I made sure of that with my blind sight. As the door closed, the silence deepened and my smile faded. I moved to the window, peeled the curtain aside just enough to check the angle, then to the door before finally turning, slower now. I meant what I said. I told her, my voice softer now, deeper. I do want to bed you. But that's not the reason I'm here. She crossed her arms, but there was no fear in her gaze, only calculation. Speak then, Lord Dandelion. I am listening. I represent a group that you might have only heard rumors about, I presume. Whispers of the strangers will finding form in the shadows of this city's slums. Her expression flickered, just slightly. Yes, I have heard these whispers, floating like smoke through silk. She admitted. But I hear things from everyone. Even the High Septon once shared his concerns to my girls about your people's dispute with the butcher. Of course he did. I grinned at that. But the cult of the stranger doesn't seek chaos. We give protection, quiet support, the kind that lets you say yes to men like Petter Baelish without ever needing to fear them. Her eyes sharpened, obviously not expecting that fact to be a known knowledge by other parties. And tell me now, I lose one chain, only to wear yours instead. She laughed then, low, amused, dangerous, before studying me for a brief moment. Not as a man, not as a customer, but as something else. Something in between threat and promise. If you must wear a chain, better one woven of silk than iron. I chuckled back, not cruelly, just amused. But of course I jest, my lady, apologies for my bad timing. Stepping forward, exploiting her moment of reflection, I pointed just once, gently, at the carved box by the dresser. I meant to say we don't demand obedience. We're already in your debt. Surely you must have wondered who left those gold coins wrapped in silk. No name, no demands. Just generosity. She said nothing. I nodded toward the far corner, where some folded blankets sat, neatly stacked. The girls you took in from Flea Bottom, they weren't sent, exactly. But we knew you'd take them. We'd seen how you ran this place and what you protected. You proved something to us. To me. Still, she watched in silence. If you want no part of us, we'll vanish. You'll never hear from me again. But if you want your sanctuary to stay a sanctuary, if you want it untouched by Baelish, by any troublesome yet influential client that takes pleasure in disrespecting your girls, or by anyone else, you need only nod. She studied me. Long. Hard. Then she asked, softly. And what do you want, really? I smiled again, dropping into a chair by the bed, lounging like a man who had all the time in the world. A few things. First, your permission to return from time to time. Nothing more than a man with coin and stories. Won't be long before I leave this city anyway. She arched her brow. And second, to learn, I said, leaning forward. You have knowledge I don't. I want to know the art of pleasuring women, not fumbling, not force, not pretending. Knowing. You're the best there is. And in exchange, she asked, voice rich with amusement now that I've sung her enough praises. I'll play some of my songs. I said, sing tales for your clients. Make even the ones who don't care for your beauty care for your atmosphere. A little music, a little magic, maybe even a tale or two like the one I know about a handsome, nameless bastard who once flirted with a goddess. Chataya tilted her head, considering. Then, slowly, her lips curved into a smile. Persuasion check failed. Damn, she was tough to influence. Heroic inspiration use expended. Persuasion check succeed. There we go, I thought without letting my expression falter. Very well, you bring more shadow than sun, but I have always liked the shade. She said, finally leading me to bed as she began to slowly undress. Then stay, sweet dandelion. Let us feel what songs you carry in your heart. I laughed, as much in delight as in excitement for my first time in this life to not only be with such an exotic beauty as Chataya, but with a professional teacher that would help me one day bend any woman to my will. And just like that, the night truly began, as in her bed of silk, I was no hunter, no shadow, just a boy who dared to dream. Only took me a few murmured inspirations and gentle corrections before I fell into the rhythm of it. By then, I was silently thanking the system for bestowing the reliable talent feature at exactly the right moment. It was a game changer, to the point that my performance checks were almost a formality. Before I knew it, Chataya was kneeling before me while facing the other side, a towering, statuesque figure of smooth ebony skin, glistening faintly in the candlelight, and as I traced my hands down her sides, my mouth kissed the curve of her bare back, leaving a trail of warmth in my wake as I felt that surge of pure desire that made everything else fall away. Her height, her graceful form, only intensified my desire, my lust. There was more of her to touch, to savor, to claim. Almost like I would. Charisma save failed. Heroic inspiration use expended. Charisma save succeed. Oh, now I see where things are going. We were both trying to see who would be charmed first by the other. Lucky me, I'm always open to some friendly competition. With that in mind, I let my subtle magic hum in the air, a faint vibration rippling under my fingertips. It was enough to make her shiver, to heighten the sensation of my touch as I moved to cup her breasts, their weight warm and firm in my hands. Her body arched back against mine, the movement instinctual, as if our bodies had become attuned to one another. And I couldn't help but revel in the feeling of my new, older form pressing against her. The body my magic mask had given me wasn't more than a slight edge in combat through height and reach, but right here it was designed to tempt, to pleasure, to fulfill desires in ways no amount of makeup and mundane props could aid in disguising me. As Chataya glanced down, her eyes widened and breath caught when she saw the heavy proof of my desire pressing against her, pointing out between her own legs eager for entry, a clear reflection of her effect on me. Ready for me, I whispered, my lips brushing her ear, my hands still playing with the tender curve of her breasts, my voice thick with anticipation. She turned to meet my gaze, her voice low and steady. Always. As I pulled one hand back from her breasts and guided my cock into her entrance, she let out a soft and warm moan. I guided myself to her, our bodies locking together with a slow, deliberate motion. The tension between us grew with every inch, every breath. Her body continuously responded with soft moans, soft but full of longing, a sound that reverberated deep within me. She reached behind her, her arms binding me closer, giving me full control. The weight of her touch, her trust, felt like a promise. My hands moved, one to her chest, the other weaving through her hair, pulling her closer as our bodies found their rhythm. Kissing her again, this time deeper, more urgently, I kept savoring the way her lips parted beneath mine. Her response was immediate, her tongue moving against mine in a dance of its own. The intensity of it caught her off guard. This wasn't just a lesson. This was my way of marking myself in her mind. It was meant to be the best feeling ever for both of us, having her head turned slightly connecting our lips, so I impressed her again and again with a little creative use of my tongue. Say what you will about that Martin Lawrence movie, Black Knight, but the guy really was onto something with kissing medieval women the modern way. By all the gods, you make teaching such sweet delight. She whispered to me with her arousing accent, amidst her incessant moans. Her words struck me in ways I hadn't expected. Instead of answering, I quickened my pace, deepening the connection, pushing us both to the edge of something new, something electric. The moment stretched on, each movement a beat in a connection we both felt in our bones. And when she finally reached her peak, her cry sharp and full of longing echoed through the air, leaving us both breathless. Yes, she gasped, before pulling me for another one of my special kisses. Target failed its save. Chataya is now charmed. At that I felt a slow, satisfied grin spread across my face as I rested against her, my heart still racing from the intensity of what we had just experienced. Even now, with her body still trembling beneath mine, I knew we weren't finished. Not yet. Not with the way her eyes glinted, her lips still slightly parted, a smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Heroic inspiration use gained. My man. Constitution save succeed. Ready for round 2, I whispered with a gentle provocation of her inviting flower, glad that I could finally risk this from my bucket list. Are you Wood Lee? She jumped at me as if she was a predator that had found its perfect prey. Silly her, believe me when I say that I could do this all day, especially when having sex literally gave me this sensation of being able to take on the entire world. After continuing at nailing the gorgeous Chataya for quite a while after that, having completely surpassed all of the expectations she had when first accepting to teach about lovemaking and sexual pleasure, she finally asked me for a pause so she could rest. Accepting the break she asked for, I took the chance to return to the common room and continue polishing my performance skill, this time for an audience of wealthy and not easy to please clients who had begun their evening celebrations early. The brothel, under my patronage, subtle though it was, had flourished. My agents among the cult of the stranger had been quietly reshaping Flea Bottom, and this place had become both sanctuary and stage. Chataya's girls, many of them former street urchins now secretly devoted to my persona as the stranger, had been refined under her guidance. The summer haven was no longer a simply expensive brothel, it was becoming an institution of art, pleasure, and performance. But enough of the details. For now, I'd found a better place to hone my charisma than teasing Elise or entertaining my half-siblings. Here, I posed as a foreign traveler, a minstrel that has traveled all places in Westeros and even many more beyond the sea, sharing the art that my travels have granted me with the nobility of King's Landing. Lords and knights from across the Crownlands gathered with drink in hand, some in silk, others still half in armor, as I plucked at my lute. The other instruments were still new to me, but I was learning them, rhythm, tone, tempo. They responded to my voice. My hands. My intent. Performance check succeed. After nearly an hour, I even noticed my father among the crowd. Robert Baratheon, the demon of the trident, grinning beneath that wild beard of his, mug in hand. He was enjoying himself. Perhaps it was the music. Perhaps it was the familiar glint in my eye, the one I personally wanted my mask of the changeling to attempt to borrow from his own youth. Either way, the king raised no objection when I played on. And so, after introducing myself to all the present clients with all the gallantry that the Knight of Flowers will one day master, I began recalling a tune from my past life, shifting to a brisker rhythm before finally starting to sing. Once upon a younger year, I began. When all our shadows disappeared, the animals inside came out to play. The crowd tilted their heads, intrigued. To be sure, it was a strange lyric, to just the same a brand new melody to their ears. That alone gave credit to my mystery. Went face to face with all our fears, learned our lessons through the tears, made memories we knew would never fade. I tapped my foot against the wooden floor, setting the rhythm, and motioned for the audience to join in. Thankfully, they did, or I would have felt quite silly. One day my father told me, "Son, don't let it slip away." He took me in his arms. I heard him say, "When you get older, your wild heart will live for younger days. Think of me if ever you're afraid." My voice rose, clear and sure. He said, "One day you'll leave this world behind, so live a life you will remember." My father told me when I was just a child, "These are the nights that never die." My father told me. The second time I repeated the chorus, I paused, letting the room take over. And they did. On the third time through, the wealthy and drunk and sentimental sang for me. When thunder clouds start pouring down, light a fire they can't put out, carve your name into those shining stars. He said, "Go venture far beyond the shores, don't forsake this life of yours. I'll guide you home, no matter where you are." They were all hooked. One day my father told me, "Son, don't let it slip away." When I was just a kid, I heard him say, "When you get older, your wild heart will live for younger days. Think of me if ever you're afraid." I lifted my arms, letting the lute fall silent, singing without it now. He said, "One day you'll leave this world behind, so live a life you will remember." My father told me when I was just a child, "These are the nights that never die." My father told me. Selected targets haven failed their save. They are now charmed. Concluding my performance, I signaled for them to end the song, finally starting to grasp the real power behind my enthralling performance ability. And they roared it back at me, all at once, clapping, laughing, smiling with tear-streaked cheeks. These are the nights that never die. Bravo! Bellowed Robert, slamming his mug onto the table, half its contents sloshing over the edge. Another. The whole room echoed his call. So, naturally, I gave them another. This time, slower, softer. I picked a new rhythm and let my voice carry it. Once I was 7 years old, my mother told me, go make yourself some friends or you'll be lonely. Once I was 7 years old. The effect of my bardic inspiration mixed with my better understanding of performance was just too broken. It was a big, big world, but we thought we were bigger. Pushing each other to the limits, we were learning quicker. By 11 burning herbs and sipping fire wine. Never rich, so we were out to make that steady figure. The songs I shared with them weren't merely for their catchy melody, but also because of the deep meaning behind their lyrics, thanks to how I've slightly tweaked them to match this world understanding. Once I was 11 years old, my father told me, go get yourself a wife or you'll be lonely. Once I was 11 years old. A gentler tune. A story song. Familiar in structure, but foreign in tone. Evoking emotions amidst the audience, I played with their heartstrings with my best alluring voice. I always had that dream like my father before me. So I started writing songs, I started writing stories. Something about the glory just always seemed to bore me. Because only those I really love will ever really know me. Cheers and claps again kept filling the air of this luxurious brothel. Their hearts were mine as I kept pulling the strings gently. Once I was 20 years old, my story got told before the morning sun, when life was lonely. Once I was 20 years old, I only see my goals, I don't believe in failure. Because I know the smallest voices, they can make it major. The drink, the food, the women were just a combination too hard for any hard-to-please noble to resist, especially the hedonistic type like my father. I got my comrades with me, at least those in favor. And if we don't meet before I leave, I hope I'll see you later. Once I was 20 years old, my story got told. I was writing about everything I saw before me. Once I was 20 years old. Soon we'll be 30 years old, our songs have been sold. We've traveled around the world and we're still roaming. Soon we'll be 30 years old. Bringing the energy down for a moment, I watched their faces, flushed, wet, lost in memories of their own. Robert had grown still, not drunk, not loud. Quiet, seemingly nostalgic. He must have been thinking of the Airy, back when he and Eddard were still John Aaron's ward. Simpler times, before crowns and wars and regrets. I'm still learning about life. My woman brought children for me, so I can sing them all my songs, and I can tell them stories. Most of my comrades are with me. Some are still out seeking glory. And some I had to leave behind. My brother, I'm still sorry. Soon I'll be 60 years old. My father got to 61. Remember life and then your life becomes a better one. And then I brought the music down again, soft and intimate. I made the man so happy when I wrote a letter once. I hope my children come and visit, once or twice a month. Soon I'll be 60 years old. Will I think the world is cold? Or will I have a lot of children who can warm me? Soon I'll be 60 years old. Soon I'll be 60 years old. Will I think the world is cold? Or will I have a lot of children who can hold me? Soon I'll be 60 years old. The mood was thick with feeling, and I had to finish this emotional trip I began leading them all through. Once I was 7 years old, my mother told me, go make yourself some friends or you'll be lonely. Once I was 7 years old. Once I was 7 years old. Well, will you look at that? I've managed to make the mighty Robert Baratheon, demon of the Trident, shed a few tears because of my song. Can't be because of his feelings towards his brothers, or be, my siblings and mother. He's probably reminiscent of his time in the Vale, being raised in the Eyrie with Jon Arryn and Eddard Stark. Simpler times for him, I suppose. Hearing the people having a good time, talking, laughing, drinking, eating and some even making out right then and there, I went for another song, this time with a soothing lull. One even more calm than the previous one. This one perhaps required a rework the most to fit into this world's view. I was glad that I've learned the names of the week here, something most common folk barely knew the reason behind, but still showed how the faith of the seven was ingrained in their day-to-day lives. Sunday was 7 day, easy enough to guess, since it served as their version of a Sabbath. Then came Moon Day, their take on Monday, which still nearly gets a chuckle out of me every time. Tuesday here was called Tower Day, which Pycelle once explained was named for the warrior's tower of vigilance. Wednesday became Well Day, tied to the smith's labor and the wealth that follows honest work. Thursday was known as Theoday, an apparent homage to the Father above. Friday turned into Fair Day, meant to reflect both the mother's mercy and the maiden's grace. Finally, Saturday was their Sorrow Day, named either for the crone's somber wisdom or the stranger's shadowy presence, a point that, amusingly, is still a matter of scholarly debate among the maesters. Where there's a will, there's a way, kind of beautiful. And every night has its day, so magical. And if there's love in this life, there's no obstacle that can't be defeated. Love and hope were indeed powerful emotions to conjure up amongst an audience. For every tyrant, a tear for the vulnerable. In every lost soul, the bones of a miracle. For every dreamer, a dream, were unstoppable. With something to believe in. Robert supported my claim with a booming laughter. Moon Day left me broken. Towers Day, I was through with hoping. Well Day, my empty arms were open. Thea Day, waiting for love, waiting for love. The rest followed, delighted, laughing and dancing, so I played into it. Thank the stars it's fair day. I'm burning like a fire gone wild on Stern Day. Guess I won't be coming to a sept on 7 Day. I'll be waiting for love, to come around. The pleasant atmosphere was just too contagious. We are one of a kind, irreplaceable. How did I get so blind and so cynical? If there's love in this life, we're unstoppable. No, we can't be defeated. Moon Day left me broken. Towers Day, I was through with hoping. Well Day, my empty arms were open. Thea Day, waiting for love, Preparing to make this song live in their heads rent-free for long after I left this city, I added some extra flair into my performance. Thank the stars it's fair day. I'm burning like a fire gone wild on Stern Day. Guess I won't be coming to a sept on 7 Day. I'll be waiting for love, to come around. It was an infectious atmosphere, as joy spread like wildfire. One more song. Just one more. They begged like children at bedtime. Since I didn't want to be a party pooper, I picked another song after making sure they knew this was my last one for the night. Feeling my way through the darkness, guided by a beating heart, I can't tell where the journey will end, but I know where to start. I sang with a low voice, as they all listened, rapt. They tell me I'm too young to understand, they say I'm caught up in a dream. Life will pass me by if I don't open up my eyes. Well, that's fine by me. Then I lifted them high once more as I continued. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost. Playing each note with the utmost skill I could currently muster. I tried carrying the weight of the world, but I only have 2 hands. Hope I get the chance to travel the world, but I don't have any plans. Wish that I could stay forever this young. Not afraid to close my eyes. Life's a game made for everyone. And love is a prize. Let's go. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over. When I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost. I didn't know I was lost. Final notes barely rang out before cheers erupted. Gold clinked at my feet. Hands clapped my back. Robert raised his mug again, this time silent, but smiling in a way I rarely saw. He was proud, or at least what was the face he would have shown me if my appearance didn't constantly remind him of his hate for the Targaryens. As he turned toward a fair girl with a knowing grin, I bowed and took my leave, slipping back into Chataya's waiting embrace, who by her looks was even more impressed by my musical talent. Oh, the perks of plagiarism, some great works without anyone around being there that knows what I did. Regardless, the night was still young and I had more than earned to celebrate my name day as much as I could. Later, whenever asked about my background, I told what the people wanted to hear, just not always the same thing. To the lords and ladies, I was the bastard orphan son of a fallen noblewoman, born beneath a dying tree where frost-kissed flowers bloom. She sang to me once, then vanished from this world, leaving me with nothing but a name no one dared to write. I spoke of distant travels, of trading songs for secrets in the soft salons of Lee, of wandering the courts of Tirosh with a liar's grin and a poet's tongue. To the sellswords and the rougher sort, I'd slit my first throat with a lute string at 12, and learned to keep my back to the wall ever since. My father, a blade for hire. My mother, danced for coppers till her feet bled. To the small folk, I was born in a brothel, raised in a barn, kissed by the stranger, and blessed by the 7. A tale for every ear, a face for every crowd. I changed with the wind, but my song stayed the same. Later that day, I did what was expected of me and made myself present in any manner that mattered, which didn't mean that I appreciated parading around. I do loathe such large crowds. I muttered, weaving through the throng of bodies pressing in from every direction while my uncle kept me safe. My father relishes these tourneys, but I fear the timing is ill-suited for such festivities. Jaime Lannister chuckled lightly behind me, ignoring the hungry stares from half the women we passed. You're most ungrateful, my prince. Our fathers paid a mountain of gold for this spectacle. As their kin, we could at least pretend to enjoy it, especially since we're celebrating your 6th name day. I'm not you, uncle. I replied, glancing over my shoulder with a smirk. I'm not a knight yet, and I've no need for glory, not from a suffocating crowd. Still, I do appreciate the fresh blood it's brought into the city. I smiled at the thought of all the arrivals. Not the gawkers and fools, but the relevant ones. Noteworthy figures from the Crownlands had answered the invitation: houses Bar Emmon, Celtigar, Sunglass, Massey, Rosby, and Stokeworth. Bar Emmon's attendance gave me a chance to meet young Durham, his quiet but clever heir. Lord Adrian Celtigar, greedy old vulture that he is, had taken an interest in me, which might prove useful. Sunglass, Massey, and Rosby made for solid first impressions. A pious man, an eccentric one, and a noble who was finally no longer too sick to stand upright. Lady Lolly's Stokeworth had also attended, accompanying her family, which meant I could speak with her before she grew into the unfortunate woman the books like to mock. Still, a few key names were missing. At the very top of that list was Lord Valarian of Driftmark. A shame, I could definitely use some Valerian blood to make me feel less of an oddity in this city. As I listed each of these relevant houses, I couldn't help myself from thinking that their castle's magical dungeons would offer loot just as great as the one under the Red Keep. And now that my command over magic and skill had grown, I was ready for a challenge. But I digress. Uncle Jamie and I strode through the city as banners flew proudly from every corner. From the pierced son of House Martell, an appearance close to miraculous, all things considered, to the golden rose of House Tyrell, it seemed all the great houses had imagined some greater meaning behind this tournament than merely my father wishes to shatter the dull rhythm of his kingship. Knights on horseback filled the streets, their banners fluttering in the spring wind. The markets blared with noise, horses neighing, merchants shouting, and the clink of rubies and sapphires as armor glinted too bright to bear. So the Martells actually came. I muttered, crossing my arms. I don't recall them ever being this close to King's Landing, not in my lifetime. The prince knows his history. Jamie said with a slow, half-interested nod. Not that you've lived that long, but you're right. They're no friends of Sir Gregor Clegane, and with both him and the Hound in this tourney, it's no surprise they'd show up to reclaim some honor. Maybe more than that. Can't blame them, I admitted, tone colder now. Even I've heard the whispers about what he did. I turned to look up at Jamie, face grim. If it had been Mother and me, you would have struck that monster down before he ever laid a finger on us. Jamie said nothing. He only nodded, jaw clenched. By now, everyone close to me knew I was too well informed for my age, so I was used to getting away without anyone questioning me. We moved in silence through the gates of the Red Keep, gold cloaks parting as we passed. Marble corridors gleamed underfoot, polished so finely they mirrored every torch and shimmered like water. The great hall stood transformed from its state under the Targaryen kings. Long gone were the dragon skulls and austere Valyrian grandeur. In their place were rich tapestries, imported artifacts, and enough gold to feed hundreds of peasants for years. Yet, no matter how many years I had to grow used to it, the Iron Throne still sat, ugly and unchanged, a blackened tangle of melted blades. If I live enough to become king, this monstrosity will be reformed into something more appropriate. To the seven hells with the conqueror and his damn metaphor. A king should sit in command, not discomfort. But that was neither here nor there for now. Soon we stepped forward and bowed, one knee to the floor before the Iron Throne. Your Grace. We spoke in unison. Robert Baratheon sat slouched and scowling, wine already in hand. His beard had grown thick, hair longer than I remembered from my birth, and though his frame still bore the undeniable strength of a warrior king, I wondered how long it would last. The Greyjoys would rise soon, that much was inevitable, but what then? There were still 10 years before the books truly began. Everything is accounted for, Jamie reported. The tourney may begin at your command. Your brother leads the Baratheon knights while the lords are taking their seats. Robert stood, booming with laughter. Excellent, let's ride over with the knights. He clapped his hands and descended the steps with surprising grace for a man so drunk. On his way, he tossed a glance my way and suddenly asked. Have you placed your bets yet, boy? Not yet, Your Grace. But I do plan on winning quite a bit. Robert laughed again, loud and warm, while Jamie subtly shook his head from out of my father's view, amused at our strange bond. It wasn't love, but it was better than hate. If you were old enough, I could teach you a few things. I spent a lot of time with the women, Robert began shamelessly declaring until came the cough, loud and deliberate, belonging to John Arryn. The king dismissed it as nothing, but from Jaime's look he clearly didn't. His face darkened, jaw twitching. He said nothing, but his loathing was clear to my insight skill. The Kingslayer had no desire for the king to bed his sister, but he also hated the fact that he would so casually disregard his queen as if she was some common whore he bought from their father. Not that I could blame him. In Jaime's eyes, Cersei was one of the most desirable and beautiful women in the realm, and she deserved better. I sort of shared that sentiment, regardless of how much of a spoiled bitch she was, who didn't get enough spanking from her parents while they still could. Ha, enough of this talk, Robert bellowed. Let's go see some real action. No more slow meetings, no more counting copper. Today is about glory, honor, and blood. While Robert strode ahead, almost as if reading Jaime's festering thoughts, I decided to distract him with an honest question. Will the tourney champion be named as my sworn shield? That's the plan, he replied, lighting up at the opportunity to tease me. Disappointed? Not yet. I'm still holding out hope you'll change your mind and join me instead. I told him, earning an awkward laugh and some excuses that my mother and siblings needed him there. Instead of pushing on in that subject, I decided to change subjects instead. Incidentally, where's Uncle Tyrion? I've been wanting to meet him for quite a while. He and my father are still en route from Castle Rock, Jaime said, falling into step beside me. They should arrive any moment now. I've been meaning to ask. Is it wise to start the tournament before Grandpa gets here? I asked while raising an eyebrow. It is not as if your father can wait any longer, my dear nephew. He replied back, with a half-amused half-worried expression I knew came from years of having Tywin Lannister as his father. Once again, I sort of understood where my uncle was coming from. Regardless, for now, I had somewhere else to be, someone else to see. I had to visit Rhaenys before the real party started. Definitely couldn't miss the reunion Jaime's butterfly effect actions have allowed once he saved her from Armory Lorch back in the night the Mad King's reign fell. Rhaenys Targaryen's Pav. Officially, this was a courtesy visit. That's what Varys had told me. After all, my Martell family had come to attend Durandon's 6th name day, with murmurs of diplomacy drifting like incense behind them. But no one ever brings a viper into a garden for peace. Suffice to say that reuniting with my uncle was not what I had expected. Uncle Doran had a stillness about him. The kind that made you listen closely to every word, not because he commanded the room with booming speeches or threatening gaze, but because his silences felt like cliffs, one wrong step, and you were already falling. In his early 40s, he moved without hesitation. The only weight he carried was entirely internal, grief aged and slow burning, coiled like a viper beneath silken robes. It's good to see you, my niece. His voice was soft, like a bomb. But I caught the iron behind it. I feared I would never have this chance. He embraced me, stiffly at first, as if unsure whether he had the right. But once his arms were around me, I felt it. The quiet sorrow, the layered regret, the buried fury. Thank you for coming, I said, weighing each word. It means more than I can express. He nodded, taking in my face like he was trying to memorize it. And yet, I worry that the baby princess I might have once known is already gone. I left her behind, I admitted, immediately catching the meaning behind his words while straightening my posture. The helpless girl, she wouldn't have survived, and I needed to. A shadow passed across his expression. You shouldn't have had to. But I did, I said matter-of-factly. Doran didn't argue. My quick read on my uncle told me that was the thing about him, he rarely fought in the open. You've been learning from the spider, he observed, gaze flicking toward Varys, who lingered at the edge of our private chamber like a ghost in silk. I have, I replied. He's taught me how to walk unseen. How to listen without being heard. And most importantly, how not to die. Doran's jaw tightened. I don't like that he had to. Neither do I said. Yet surviving doesn't wait for permission. He turned to Varys then, and the weight of Dorne's prince settled into his spine like armor being laced onto a patient soldier. I hear you've shown her the value of masks and whispers. But what do you want, Lord Varys? The spider inclined his head, as humble as always. Only what is best for the realm, my prince. A humorless breath escaped Doran's nose. I've heard that line before, albeit less wrapped in a vague sense of altruism. It usually precedes chaos all the same. Sometimes. Varys agreed. Doubt, division, and mistrust will eat the very ground beneath the rule of the usurper king, whilst the one true king is molded to one day raise his banner so all the sensible lords of the realm might gather round him. Doran was silent, almost as if a secret that should never be spoken loud enough for another soul to hear, until he finally asked. The one true king. Aegon is alive, Varys stated, betraying no uncertainty in his claim. Even now, long after hearing Varys' words for the first time, the weight of it pressed into the room like an unseen tide. Uncle Doran didn't gasp, didn't stagger, but I saw it in the flicker of his eyes as his mind undoubtedly conjured up images of a baby swaddled in a crimson cloak, the cloth stained with the child's own blood and brains. Shock held in check by decades of practice. I told him the rest. The night I'd learned the truth from Varys's whispers. The boy supposedly saved from death, hidden in shadow. My supposed little brother. Doran listened without interruption, though his fingers clenched subtly in the folds of his robe. The only doubt I allowed myself, and even then, only in secret, was the way Durandon had looked at me whenever the revelation was brought up. He obviously didn't want to hurt my feelings without knowing for sure, but his cunning mind was all the proof I needed to suspect Varys was hiding something. What might that possibly be I didn't know yet. But the years of being mentored by the spider had to grant me the necessary skill to find that out for myself. And your mother? My uncle at last asked, voice low, what I kept questioning myself even in my dreams. She only asked for the boy to be saved. That's what I was told. I said, eyes flicking to the eunuch. The spider claims it was her will. So you chose Aegon over Elia. Over Rhaenys. Doran turned back to Varys. His tone wasn't accusing, not exactly. But it was sharp enough to almost draw blood. I chose the realm. Varys replied, unmoved. 1 life, 2 lives, even 10, what are they against the fires of another war? And yet here you are, kindling another one. My uncle said coldly. Varys, eyes flicked to him, unreadable. Then Uncle Doran asked the question I'm sure Varys has been waiting for. What would you have us do? You plan to marry Arianne to Viserys. Varys laid my uncle's plans bare, calm as ever. Indeed, a sound plan. Strengthening your house ties to the Targaryens would surely earn you some support from the still remaining loyalists. The eunuch let the appraisal of my uncle's scheme sink in for a moment, taking his time to slowly set up the mood for what he was about to say. But, perhaps now that I've presented you with a more viable future, now that I assure you that Aegon will be raised to rule and groomed for kingship. He glanced at me again and I met his gaze without flinching. The thing I believe would be most appropriate would be to wed your nephew to your niece. But I wouldn't dare make any move without consulting you first. Doran said nothing at first, but I saw the storm clouding behind his eyes. Even if what you say is true, even if this boy is who you claim he is, will he be better because you made him into your perfect image of a ruler? My uncle spared no shadow of doubt in his words. Because he was made to survive. Varys corrected, not unkindly. Doran sat heavily, one hand resting over the other, lost in thought. It seems peace has many faces. And all of them wear crowns. I knew what he was weighing. Marrying me to my own brother, regardless of how much of a tradition it might be for the Targaryens, was still a delicate matter even for the rich and open culture of Dorne. Whatever support both my brother Aegon and young Uncle Viserys might raise for himself across the narrow sea would still have to deal against the might of the Seven Kingdoms. Though never conquered, Dorne had been bloodied more than once when it marched beyond its deserts, its armies dashed against the combined might of the Reach and the Stormlands. Add to that the support the Baratheon king still commands with not only the Starks, the Arryns and the Tullys, but also with the Lannisters, the ones that have made it clear their eagerness to bind themselves to the Baratheons through blood and treachery. But Durandon never showed his whole hand. Whatever game he was playing, he played it close to the chest. He clearly knew about the conspiracy the spider was scheming with the Martells and didn't seem to worry about that. He also knew that his mother had sired children with his Lannister uncle. I highly doubted he would just hand the throne over without a fight. Even so, I knew Durandon better than to expect him to fight a battle he wasn't sure he had all the odds stacked in his favor. Then again, despite my early illusions of quickly becoming my own master of whispers and playing the game against the best of the best, I now understood that I was still a piece on the board. It's my niece's life you are asking me to gamble with, Spider. He said quietly with a sigh, and to his credit, he looked pained. I looked back at him, trying to take charge of my life the only way I currently knew how. I know that, Uncle. But we must play with the cards that we are dealt with. Eventually, after things calmed down again, our talk turned to Durandon. To the boy I'd secretly grown beside, trained beside, plotted beside. Varys mentioned he would be sent to Castle Rock, a ward of the Lions. And for a moment, the weight of this whole charade, the game, the future, the false peace, pressed so tightly against my chest, I could barely breathe. But I promised myself that I would not remain a pawn forever. Doran and Varys fell into low conversation after that, their voices rising and falling like soft winds in a dead orchard. And I was led away to meet the cousins I'd once known only by name and vague descriptions. As I was led from my uncle's chambers, I felt the air shift. Less heavy, less cloaked in decades of regret, but no less unnerving. I was no longer speaking with ghosts of the past. Now, I would meet the living young blood of Dorne, quickly noticing how they were all sun and color with barely sheathed fury. I heard them before I saw them. The clash of sandals on marble, the swish of silk, a sharp voice arguing in the hall, Obara, I would later learn. The tallest of them, the loudest, and the one most like a blade in a scabbard too tight. They came 3 abreast, and Ariane just behind, more veiled than I expected. Like a secret wrapped in flame. She wore layers of yellow and purple that danced as she walked, her sandals snaking up her thighs, a jeweled girdle glinting like a challenge. She was shorter than I thought she'd be. The veil shimmered with pale green and gold, and her voice, when she greeted me, was soft and low and thick with her Dornish accent. Princess Rhaenys, I'm so glad to finally be able to meet you again. Last time I saw you, you were but a baby I could carry in my arms. She curtsied, gracefully, but not humbly. I must apologize for the absence of my younger brothers. The road from Sunspear isn't kind to their younger age. Princess Ariane, there's no need to apologize. It's good to see you too, dear cousin. I returned the gesture, knowing that unlike me, she wore the title without a dozen eyes questioning her right to it. Turning to the others, I added, all of you. Obara snorted, as if I'd said something funny without meaning to. Nymeria smiled back, that small, knowing curve of her lips that made it hard to tell whether she liked me or not. And Tyene just looked at me with those deep blue eyes and a sugar-sweet smile that reminded me too much of Elise. The young Aaron's kindness had thorns too, but at least they were honest thorns. It might be different for you here in the capital, Obara began, her voice was rough but not unkind. But in Dorne, we don't cut one another down to stand taller. We train together, bleed together, like sisters. Her words might have sounded threatening or confrontational at first sight, but I easily saw through it as her way to measure me up. Not that much of a refined tactic, but still more than I originally gave her credit for. I thought Dorne didn't kneel. I finally replied, hoping to have come up with an appropriate answer. Yet here you are, attending the Baratheon prince's name day. Nymeria's smile sharpened just a little. Even vipers know how to smile at a feast. Obara let out a quiet chuckle, then gave me a half nod of approval. You still got some bite left on you after all, my princess. If you ever want to learn the skills of battle, I'll teach you. Truly, that startled me. Both Varys and Durandon had gone to extreme lengths in order to teach me the art of espionage and thievery, but my experience with executing targets from the shadows didn't exactly compare to surviving the open battlefield. I don't say things I don't mean. Obara shrugged, as if she hadn't just offered me something most girls would never hear from her lips. Ariane laughed softly, her eyes gleaming beneath her veil. We've all lost something, haven't we? Perhaps it's time we find new ways to carry what remains. That sounded like something Varys might say, which made me wary. I looked to Tyene, standing demurely behind her cousins in a gown of pale blue samite, Myrish lace dusting her sleeves like frost. Her hands were clasped before her, her smile unwavering. You're very pretty, she said, eyeing the strand of silver in my hair that refused to stop growing. So are you, I replied, silently recognizing the glint behind her sweetness. Forgive me my curiosity, princess. Nymeria stepped closer then, her voice low, her tone measured. But what do you remember of your mother? My father always speaks of her. The question hit me harder than I expected. A scent, a song, her hands in my hair. Nymeria nodded. Father says memory is the only inheritance some of us get. She meant my uncle Oberyn, who I'd heard hadn't come along because his bold spirit, and notorious temper, might have led him to declare war on the Lannisters then and there. A risk Uncle Doran wasn't willing to take, even for a brief visit to the capital. Later on, I kept watching my present cousins closely as we finally began to speak more like girls and less like ghosts or strangers. And through that closer observation, I began to imagine them in the years to come, Obara, leading charges down dusty roads. Nymeria, cloaked in courtly silks with daggers hidden in every hem. Tyene, sweetly slipping poison into a cup while no one was watching. And Ariane, the girl who would one day rule Dorne, but for now still praying for beauty under her veil. They were sharp things. All of them. We weren't expected to become sisters overnight. The time was too short. The wounds were still too fresh. But if I ever had to turn my back on them, I'd want a mirror behind me. Once our bonding time was over and the Martells were required to leave the Red Keep, off to the tourney grounds beyond the city walls to maintain appearances, I was left alone. Again. Is everything all right? The familiar voice cut through the silence, pulling me from the swirl of thoughts left in the wake of all the heartfelt encounters I'd just experienced. I turned toward the hidden passage in my chamber wall and replied. Yes, just processing my reunion with my mother's side of the family. Durandon stepped out from the shadows with that ever-knowing expression of his, the one that made it seem like he understood just as much as I did, and possibly more. But then I saw Elise standing beside him. It must have been hard for you, she said gently, her voice full of quiet compassion. She came forward and wrapped her arms around me, and for a moment, I just stood there. Did I truly look that fragile? My uncle, my cousins, they had all embraced me too. Was this how everyone saw me? Someone in need of comforting. Ouch. I winced as Durandon flicked me on the forehead with a finger. Why did you do that? I asked, rubbing the spot as Elise pulled back, frowning in concern. You looked far too gloomy for someone who just reunited with her family. He said, not unkindly. Elise gently brushed my hair aside, inspecting my forehead with a soft touch. It's just that I hesitated, waving off her concern before glancing back at Durandon. He knew me too well. He always expected honesty. I don't know what to make of them yet. I barely remembered their names before today. And all the talk about my mother, it's not easy to keep reliving it. Even if our stories are different, Elise said quietly. I understand what that feels like. Of course she did. Her own mother had died before she could remember her, and the stepmother who followed hadn't lasted long enough to leave anything behind but silence. And from what I knew of her father's current Tully wife, well, it didn't seem like things had improved. I nodded and returned her hug, this time, with purpose. Meow. The sharp little sound made me glance to the side. Valerian, my beloved cat from childhood, now one of Durandon's trained strays, had crept in, his body tense, signaling something. Sorry, girls, Durandon said, his voice shifting into that familiar calm command. Hate to hurry you both, but we need to get going. We both nodded. The day ahead would be long, with tourneys to attend and influential people to charm. The 22nd of September 2020. The 24th of September 2020. The 30th of September 2021. The 4th of July 2022. The 1st of January 2025. Hope this chapter is of your liking. Anything you wish to ask, feel free to do so. Check out my auxiliary chapter if you still haven't. Thanks as always for your attention and please be safe. Any problems with my writing, just point them out and I will correct them as soon as possible. I do recommend fanfiction.net, Blood and Vengeance, from Kyoka Suigetsu Tatsuka. It inspired me a lot to create my story. I really like it. Check it out. Have some idea about my story? Comment it and let me know. Like it. Add to library. I tagged this book. Come and support me with a thumbs up. Creation is hard. Cheer me up. Vote for me. Your gift is the motivation for my creation. Give me more motivation. Daichi_TBR 193 creators, thoughts.